All right, without further ado, everybody, welcome into our painting event here live on Twitch. My name is Erin. For those who haven't watched me before, you can see my name is erinbunpaints because I do paint. I go by Erin Bun, so that's what I am, erinbunpaints, or who I am. And today I'll be teaching you step-by-step how to paint a beautiful painting. We're painting the painting that you see beside me over here. Yes, over here. You have a nice large version here, but what I will be doing is switching you over to this scene here, where you can see my painting in progress, and you can also see the original in the top right as well, and that'll stay there the entire time so you can always reference it. And I'll be bringing the original up and down a little bit to reference as well. But mostly what'll be happening during this step-by-step tutorial is I'll actually be painting along with you, so you can visually see exactly what I'm doing. You can see me add every single color, talk about how I'm applying the color, what brushes I'm using. I do my best to go into detail so that you can follow right along with me. But with that being said, I always remind everybody that they're more than welcome to change the painting up. So I know we're probably here to, get a design that's similar to mine, but if you feel like at any point you want to change things up, whether it be the color of your flowers or the orientation of your canvas, I'm doing landscape orientation, you could switch it to portrait. Maybe you have a different size canvas, that's all completely fine. Art should be whatever you want it to be. As I was just describing at the start there, it should be hopefully a nice stress release, not a stress gainer. So anything to help you kind of move along and just enjoy the painting process, feel free to do that and change up whatever you need to change up. Speaking of materials, the paints and the materials that I'll be using, they stay the same every single tutorial that I do, give or take maybe a few things, but for the most part I use the same 5 paint colors and 3 paint brushes and then other extra items as well. So for the 5 paint colors today, I will be using all 5. I have red, yellow, phthalo blue, black, and white. They're not all on my palette yet, but I have blue and white ready because those are the first colors we'll be using. You can say hi to the volcano plate, it's still growing every day, getting heavier. The brushes I'm using are the same 3 brushes as always. We have a large flat brush, a medium round brush, and a small round brush as well. And again, if you have different brush sizes or types, that's absolutely fine as well. I'll be using those 3 though. It's just a good idea to have slightly different sizes, different shapes to work with. And then other things you should have close by include a paper towel, a cup of paint water just to be washing your brushes off in and to make sure the paint isn't drying on your brushes and wrecking your brushes. And then I always recommend wearing something you might not mind getting paint on. Just don't wear your favorite sweater, your favorite shirt. I always wear some sort of a Bob Ross shirt, or at least I try to, because I know I don't mind getting paint on him. I think it just adds to the shirt if you get a little glob of acrylic paint, so that's what I'm wearing today. Yeah, or throw on an apron, put a towel over top, whatever you need to do to keep yourself clean is good. I'll repeat again as well, the time length for this tutorial is estimated to be about 2 hours, so depending on where you are time zone wise, if you're West Coast like me, that'll be about 6 p.m., maybe a little bit longer than that, 6:30-ish. If you're East Coast, you're looking at like 9:30 for end time. And elsewhere in the world, I'm sorry, I don't know all time zones, but you can look it up. But yeah, just over 2 hours. And just know as well that I always do upload this recording to YouTube. I guess we're live right now on Twitch, but what I'm doing in the background is recording. And what I'll do is I'll edit the video, just kind of chop the start, chop the end a bit, and then upload it all on YouTube so that you can have a look at it kind of at your own time, as fast or as slow as you want, pause where you need to. And I aim to get that up sometime this week. So if maybe you complete half this painting tonight, you want to complete the rest, just check out YouTube and keep an eye on that, and I'll try and get it up as quick as possible for you, okay? I see a question already. Bittersweet asks, phthalo blue, would that be considered a regular or a baby? So I'll show it on my plate here. It's this guy here. I would say it's more of a dark blue. When you mix it with white, of course, it can go more baby blue, but more importantly, Bittersweet, I would say it's a very bright blue. It's like very vibrant. So if you see in the original above me, when you add some white, you can see the very like bright, almost turquoisey blue. That's what I'm going for, personally. If you have a different blue, that's totally fine. I would choose a blue that you like for like a sky blue, whether it's a dark blue and then you add white to it like I am, or maybe it's just already a sky blue straight out of the tube. I hope that helps. Yeah, there's so many kinds of blue. It's hard to keep track of them all, but I do my best to get you something close to phthalo there. Anyway, I think that's it for the introduction, so I'm just going to do a little cheers with everybody and then we'll begin painting. So I always like to kind of give you a little summary of what we'll be doing before we start painting here. Let me try and get this original back up and I can point to some things. This painting is just a lot of layers, a lot of beautiful layers. So what I started off with on mine is I started with all our blues. We can kind of dot in some blues. We can go a little heavier with our blues because once we add our dark green, which will be our next step, we can kind of cover up some blue if we need. So for our first step of blue, it may look like there's only teeny tiny amounts, but again, you could add a little bit extra if you need to, and that way we can cover up on top with a new color if you need to kind of shrink it up again. So keep that in mind. We can be a little liberal with not just this step, but any step, because acrylic paints really cover up nicely. You can go on top, fix things up, add new things on top of old things. So keep that in mind for, you know, in general, for every step really. The brush I'm going to start out with here is the medium round brush. So again, if you don't have the exact brush, that's okay. I would just get something like medium sized, and I prefer this pointed tip here. I find it makes these nice little kind of dot splotch shapes, which we'll be doing a lot of for our leaves and our blossoms and the sky, of course. So first thing I always do is I dip in my water, go to my little plate here, and I'm going to mix a nice sky blue. So I'm just going to grab a little pile of white, a little pile of blue, and we can really see that blue in action. So again, this was phthalo blue, P-H-T-H-A-L-O. And the reason I like phthalo is, again, you can see how bright it becomes. It's not just becoming lighter, it's very, very vibrant still. Again, it's almost leaning on like a turquoise in a way. If I were to add a little yellow to this, it would be, of course, even more turquoise, but just very vibrant, very electric looking. So that's why I use it. So if you feel like your blue and white mixing together creates a little more of a dull blue, that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. It just might be the kind of blue you're using. But yeah, either way, just mixing blue and white for a nice sky blue. Oh yeah, thanks. If anyone wants the supplies written out, Marion just triggered the little command there. So if you need to look at the exact paints I'm using, the exact brushes, thank you so much. There's the sizes there too. Ooh, look at me go. You can have a look there. Thank you, Marion. So once I have a good pile of light blue on my brush, you can see it's very caked on there. I didn't do anything special with the brush. I'm just going to start kind of doing these small little brush strokes. I'm not quite pressing on and off like this. I feel like that gives a little bit of a smaller dab. Instead, what I like to do is do small brush strokes. So I'm literally using kind of the sides of the bristles, the tips and the sides, moving a little bit one direction and then just kind of lifting off. So I get larger splotches, and they're a little smoother as well. You can see they're not as like crunchy looking as going straight at the canvas. You can see they're a little smoother. And what I'm doing is I'm mostly putting these on the left-hand side, because what these little blotches are going to turn into, they're going to turn into the sky. They're going to turn into little pieces of the sky that you can see through all of our greenery and all of our blossoms. So I'm just kind of piling these on to make sure I have lots of little eventual holes in our greenery where the sky is going to shine through. So you can see just kind of scattering them about. You can have a couple of them touching. You can make larger blobs by sticking a few together. You can make singular blobs. Whatever you want, just have fun with it. Like I said, you can always cover some of these up later, so I wouldn't worry about adding too many. I think it's good to have lots of these to begin with. And as I said, I'm starting on the left-hand side. I will start to move to the right, but I'll say as I move to the right, I'm adding less and less of these. Not necessarily smaller, just less of them. So I'll just kind of space them out a little bit more. More in the middle here, you can see I'm adding still quite a few, just not as many. And eventually on the right-hand side, just a couple here and there, because theoretically in my design, I'm going to have lots of different things going on over here. It's going to be a lot more cluttered with greenery and blossoms. So we don't need quite as many as these on the right-hand side. Oh, bittersweet, that was the medium round brush. Oh yes, and Robin has given us a good reminder. I always preach about the edges of our canvas. So if you're using a canvas like me, maybe you're not, maybe you're using like a piece of paper or something at home rather than a wrapped canvas, but if you have a canvas, don't forget about these little sides here. These can be painted as well. They're not just a fun practice area, but They're an area that can be painted. You can kind of continue your design on all sides. I think that's just such a cool idea. So that when you hang it up, you can kind of see the greenery and the sky and everything else continue on the sides. So no matter where you're looking at the painting from, you can see the design everywhere. It kind of wraps around fully. All right, so lots of time for this step. Just take your time, as I said. Like, you don't need to, of course, copy exactly where I'm going. Please don't worry about, you know, putting blotches in the exact same spots as me. That would be nearly impossible. Just have fun with it. Plop it on the blue, and again, remembering you can't really go overboard because we can always cover up with more greenery. Okay, so yeah, my slight rant about curries. Love curries still, don't get me wrong. They have lots of great art supplies that I can't seem to find anywhere else. This is Curry's Art Store in Ontario. I don't know if they're in any other provinces. I think it's only Ontario, unfortunately. And I no longer live in Ontario. That's a key part to the story. So I used to shop at Curry's all the time because they had my favorite paints, the Start Academic Acrylic paints, which you see listed in my supplies there. They sold them in these 2-liter jugs, which was perfect for me because I was painting a lot and I was teaching a lot of in-person classes, and yeah, I'm kind of used to the paints now, right? So I just love working with them. And unfortunately, Curry's decided to close a lot of their locations across Ontario. I don't know how many locations they used to have. I would guess like 20 to 30 at least, though, in a couple key areas as well, key cities where I was frequenting. And over the past couple years, I would guess, they have decreased to, I think, a total of 2 stores in the entire province. And that wouldn't be a huge deal. It's obviously sad, of course. But it wouldn't be a huge deal because they do offer online ordering. You can have things shipped once you order online. But my slight rant is about their points system, because I used to shop there a lot, and I have gained a lot of Curry's points, which can be used to purchase art supplies with. I can get some free little, you know, fun art supplies with all my points. However, I'm not able to use the points online. I can't use it on their website. I can't use them on their website. They insist that I need to come into a store to use their points. And that would be hard enough considering I don't live in Ontario anymore. But I was like, okay, at least I can maybe make sure I make a trip to a Curry store when I, you know, maybe visit family or come home for whatever I come home for. But yeah, unfortunately, there's only 2 stores in the whole province. Yeah, there you go. Only stores are in Waterloo and Hamilton. That's whack, says Bray. Yeah, it's just disappointing. I'm not too mad about it because, you know, I feel like a reason they shut down is because they were finding I assume they were finding it wasn't worth it to stay open, you know, in all of those cities. Maybe COVID had an impact, which is unfortunate. Although that would be interesting to me because I feel like there was more of an art boom during COVID. But yeah, it's a little unfortunate. I don't know how to use all my lovely points. So I think next time I go back to Ontario, I have to make a literal, you know, specific trip either to Waterloo or Hamilton to use some Curry's points, and I'll just hope that, you know, they have stock of whatever I want. That's the other thing. They've been having some stocking issues, at least the last few times I was able to go in their stores. I felt like they were low on everything. So I don't know how to fix that either. I don't want to make a huge trip out. Huge trip, like a 2-hour drive. Only to find that I can't really spend my points on anything. Maybe they don't have what I'm looking for. So I think I'll try to call ahead. I'm going to see if I can order things to the store and then pick up using my points. That's kind of my only hope there. So yeah, not the worst thing obviously to happen, but it's just kind of disappointing. And it just makes me sad in general that they found that they had to close down the stores, right? It just makes me sad that they feel like there's not enough business or interest in all their art supplies for them to stay open. That's more the unfortunate part, really, not my silly little points. Because yeah, I love referring people to Curry's. I love Curry's in general. Like I said, I feel like they're just no shade to the other art stores that I visited. I feel like Curry's has been incredibly knowledgeable, great staff, And again, when the products are in stock, they carry products that I don't see anywhere else, including the paint that I always use and refer people to. So it's unfortunate. Yeah, the heck. Yeah, hello, dear Kyrta. Yeah, and then I'll bring a carry-on suitcase with me full of art supplies and paint. Exactly. I don't need any more paint, but yeah, I was thinking of, like, you know, I kind of keep talking about maybe trying out some oil paints again. I was like, what if I were to get a little oil set with my points? That way I don't feel like I'm, you know, wasting money on a new medium that I might not vibe with, but I want to try some water-based oil paints. I think I'm going to like those better. And I noticed that Curry's has them on their website, so I'm going to see if they can ensure that they have them at their store so I can maybe use my points on those. Or just another set of Tombow markers. Either or, either or. All right, so as I was blabbering about there, you can see I was just adding more blues. You may have noticed I started clumping some blue splotches together just to make larger eventual holes in my greenery. So if you haven't done that, I would recommend it, just if you like what you can see in my original. They're kind of more open areas in your greenery. Again, it's hard to go overboard, so I would just keep adding. If you're a little nervous about how much blue you have, add a little bit more, you know? A couple more strokes isn't gonna hurt you there, so I'll even add a little more too, just to join you on that. So take your time, I'll leave a couple more minutes, and then we can start with our nice dark green color to begin with. I was told at the store in Markham during the pandemic could no longer afford their lease. Yeah, I assume it's a lot of COVID related stuff. I know they were slightly shutting down some stores pre-COVID, but I feel like COVID took some key ones, like Barrie. The Barrie store was really serving like anyone north of Toronto. I'm not sure if there were any stores further north than Toronto at that point, so Barrie's about an hour out. So I think it was really serving not just Barrie, but like the whole general northern area past Toronto. So that one was really difficult to see go down, and that was definitely during the pandemic that happened, during the height of the pandemic, I should say. But yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. It was rent and just, you know, coming down to not enough business, not enough people coming in and purchasing products. So that is really unfortunate. Sad to hear. It's never a good thing when an art store has to close down because of not enough business or too high rent. That's really unfortunate. Markham, I'd believe it. Markham, Toronto, it's all crazy. Everywhere's crazy, but anyway. All right, I'll settle on this here. If you need a general look at what I've done here, here it is. You can see, especially down here, I just didn't put a whole lot because I'm looking at my reference and I hardly see any blue there. There might be one or two splotches in my original, but down here is where our big branch is gonna come in. So theoretically, more greenery, more blossoms down here. So especially here, probably not gonna see a lot of sky or blue popping in. So yeah, again, you could add, but you'll probably cover up if you start to go down here a little too much. Okay, I'm gonna prep my plate with more paints here. Just as a heads up, we'll be using lots of green coming up. Green is made by mixing blue and yellow. And there will be hints of black being used as well, so if anyone is prepping their palette, if you haven't poured all your colors already, I would just make sure there's lots of yellow and blue on there to make green, and then at least a little black, so that we can kind of dirty up the green. That's what I call it, dirtying it up. Trying to position my painting down here. There we go. I like to look at it down here while I paint. Have you added white to your blue to make some areas lighter? It was the same blue the whole time. If you see any kind of lighter areas, it might just be my paint being a little thinner, a little less thick. I see here, here, here. It's kind of like watered down. That's just a result of me not kind of squeezing the water out of my brush as much, I guess. But I tried to use the same blue the entire time. No different blues, if that's what you're asking. Keeping it simple. We don't need to change the sky color. All right, let me move you slightly into the next step here. So pretty much moving forward, at least for the next few steps at least, we're just going to be stacking on tons of green. What we'll be doing is we'll be starting with a very dark green, and we're going to mostly be putting the dark green kind of on the left-hand side, and actually kind of more on the right-hand side as well. So everywhere except for the direct middle here. We want to create some dark green over here, because this area is a little bit pushed further back. There's going to be less leaves. You can see the branches in the original are more on this side, so we're going to just keep things a little darker, a little more pushed back over here. And I guess I should say darker colors, it kind of naturally makes it look like the objects that are darker are a little bit further back. As they're lighter, they're coming a little more into view, they're coming a little closer. So the theory is we're going to keep lightening our green as we kind of move over this way. Again, with a couple exceptions, there's of course a little darkness just to add dimension here and there, but we will be covering a lot of this with light green as a result later. So yeah, forgive me if it seems a little repetitive. I'll still go nice and slow with each and every color I'm using, but just know the next couple steps are going to be quite repetitive in that we're just making a green, applying it with our medium round brush, and then making a new green, applying it with our medium round brush. Yeah. It's so nice, isn't it, Jen? So you can wash off your medium round brush whenever you're ready, and I'll teach you how to make our first green, which again is, I would describe a darker and more of like a dirty green. I'll explain that in a second. I tend to undermix, underpaint, way more blue added to my paper. Whoopsie. Green is blue and yellow. Yes, yes, I'll actually go over that right now so you can see it on my plate if you'd like. Okay, so let's start just by making a green. I want to show you why I add the black. So I'm going to mix together two colors. We have blue and we have yellow. And I guess it depends what kind of blue paint you're using, but again, I'm using a phthalo blue. So when I add blue and yellow together, it makes a very pretty green, but it's kind of like a little too vibrant for me. Even when I make it darker by adding more blue, see how that's like almost like a grass green, you know? There's some brightness to it. There's some vibrance to it. And I don't really want the vibrance quite yet. I want to keep my vibrance a little bit lower. I want it to be a little like dirtier, muddy in the background. So you can darken green by two things. You can either add more blue, which again I said is just going to kind of make it more of an emerald green. It's going to keep the vibrance but make it darker. Or if you want to make it more like dirty or like muddy looking, which again has, you know, has its use here and there, you can add a little bit of black. So again, the black's going to make this green darker, but it's also going to like almost tone it down a bit. It's just not going to be as vibrant anymore. So I'm adding some black as well. And if you can't really see on my plate, I'll try and... Oh, that's almost a little dark there. I'll compare just my plain green to my green with black. See, especially when I stroke it, especially when that canvas shows through, you can see how vibrant that's getting. It's like no matter how bright I make it or how dark I make it, rather, there's still going to be a certain like vibrance or brightness to it. So yes, that's why I recommend adding just a little black to your green. Really helps kind of push it back, makes it look a little duller. Lots of different words to describe this. Okay, hopefully you're getting that. Point is, whenever you're happy with that color, nice dirty dark green, I'm just starting to apply it just the same as I was doing with my blue, just in small little splotches. You can see I start to do this kind of back forth motion. That's just kind of naturally what I'm doing. You don't need to follow my exact strokes going back and forth. But I will say it does help with kind of making sure you're getting different directions with all your brush strokes, right? Rather than adding all your brush strokes the same, like that, switching kind of the motion of your wrist helps make sure all your little brush strokes are going different directions. It just makes it look a little more natural. You got some going horizontal, vertical, diagonal. Erin, are the Blix doing acrylic? Yes, they are. I can tell you more about that in a second. Still the medium round. Sorry if I didn't say that. I will be using the medium round for the foreseeable future. Pretty much like all of our greens. Even when we start to add some blossoms, I'll be sticking to the medium round. I'll try my best to keep reminding Bittersweet. Thank you, thank you. But for now, medium round is the star. So in terms of placement, I'll just kind of note, you can see I'm trying to place these in the gaps, of course. I don't want to waste time and cover up all my blue. But I am trying to kind of go along the sides of the blue, right? I'm starting to try and add some little perimeters to my blue paint, so you can see I'm coming right up next to them. My brush strokes overlap a little bit, and that's perfectly fine too. I wouldn't want you painstakingly going around like this and slowly carving out your blue. No, 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 no. Just plop them on nice and close. If they overlap, that's fine. But mostly just trying to cover a large amount of these gaps with this dark green. And again, sticking more to the left-hand side for now. I'll let you know when I start to travel over and what I'm doing and how much I'm adding. But for now, we're going to be spending a fair amount of time simply covering up a lot of the left-hand side. And the reason we're going so heavy to begin with here is because we're not going to add a lot of light green over here, right? It's going to be mostly dark greens that we're adding. So I'm going heavier with this first green. I might add a second, maybe a third green a little bit. But we don't want to depend on those lighter greens to cover up these gaps. So again, if anything, you can overfill it with this dark green. We can always overlap with some lighter greens, more so medium greens, a little bit later if you need to. Cindy, yes, I guess I don't have that much more to say about Blick, but yes. From my days in the painting tutorial world when I was doing events in bars and restaurants, I had a fair number of friends in America doing the same thing. And I say America because I still don't think we have Blick in Canada. I know they ship to us, but I don't think we have any stores to go to. We have our Currys, we have our Michaels, we have Desserts here and there. But from what I recall, Cindy, a lot of the friends doing similar things to me were using the Blick Academic. Academic is a good word to look for. Just in terms of price point, it usually means it's a lot cheaper. From my experience, academic paints are a little thinner as well, which is comparable to what I'm using. I would say this is a thinner academic, or thinner acrylic paint rather. And I like it just fine. I know everyone has preferences with how thick their paints are, what brands they use, but I find these just fine. It's honestly what I use for all my paintings at this point still. I keep thinking to myself I'd like to upgrade and get some maybe fancier, more expensive paints, but I have some thicker Liquitex basics back there, and sometimes I find them annoying. I'm like, I want my thin paints back. I like how they blend. So, yeah. Oh, okay, you only have Michaels in the US, New England area, gotcha. Yeah, I guess I don't know exactly where all the Blicks are located. But I guess the other thing is I think Blick has some pretty good shipping opportunities as well, again, if you purchase online. The only reason I didn't do that is because I'm in Canada, of course, and the duties would have been not worth it in the end. But I will say their price points were really tempting. Like at one point I almost did order because I thought I'd be like around the same price as Curry's, maybe a little more expensive, but yeah, dealing with customs can be a hassle, so I never really tried it myself. Oh, Charlene, those are still closed right now. Like, the website is on and live. The shop itself is still technically closed. You can't order anything. My gosh, I would love to reopen it because you and a few others have been asking, and I apologize for the wait. I haven't been doing my duty of checking in on something, but I'm basically waiting for a very boring business thing to be completed before I open up. I've been advised that I should maybe keep the store closed, just, you know, while some business things are being sorted, shifting from province to province, essentially. So, yeah, the province has been taking its time. Whoever's responsible have been taking their time with kind of finalizing just like one more thing. And I haven't been doing my job in checking in because I know it's past the timeline they estimated for that. So I need to check in on that personally. I was actually just yesterday kind of making little graphics and details for a sale for my shop because I keep saying, and I'm sticking to it, I want to do a little shop sale, as in discounts sale, when I reopen it. And so yeah, I've got some little materials ready. I've got some rates all sorted out. I know what I want to discount items at. So for anyone who's been hanging on, again, I apologize for the wait, but hopefully the wait won't be too bad if it has a little sale attached to it. So I'm hoping that's done very, very soon. I'm sorry that I can't give you a better answer because it's not really in my hands right now when that opens. I physically click the button to open it, but yeah, I'm waiting for things to be sorted out before I do that. For those out of the loop, I have a website, an art store. I opened up maybe a year and a half ago or something like that, and it's been closed for a little bit because I moved across the country recently. So it's been a little bit of a wait to get it back open, but again, I hope it's worth the wait. There won't be anything new. It'll just be the things that we've seen before, but at least discounted. And another reason I'm discounting them and trying to kind of clear out is so that I can have a little more room for new stuff, which I want to add very, very soon. Planning for that next. So yeah, it's kind of one step in a lot of steps, unfortunately. It's kind of road blocking a few things. Okay, I'm gonna still keep adding. I know it seems like we've been adding a long time here and I'm chit-chatting as we do it, but that's because we're not doing anything new still. I promise we're just still adding the same color in the same spots. I'm just still trying to fill up some gaps. Just trying to, you know, what I sometimes do if you need help with like where to go, squint your eyes a bit, kind of point out where, when you squint, you see the most blobs of white. And you just kind of go, oh, this one's pretty big, and then you can fill that in a little bit. Oh, that one's pretty big right there. Fill that in. Yeah, give it a little squint. You know, see where your eyes go. Where's the light? Where's the white on your canvas? And then just pop on a couple extra blobs there, you know? So again, we're not looking for perfection. We still have a couple greens to go for this area, but I'm trying to fill up a fair amount here, while also leaving some blue behind. Yeah, master what use it makes sense. I'm just used to it. Yeah, I've used these paints for going on like 8-9 years. My gosh, it's weird to think about, but yeah, it's been a long time using and teaching with these paints too. I guarantee you, if I were to try and teach some of my designs with Liquitex Basics, I just keep saying them because that's the other one I have, I think I'd panic. I think there'd be points where I'd be like, hold on guys, And even just certain colors across brands, right? I always yap about phthalo blue. I have yet to find a phthalo blue, even though there's other phthalo blues that exist that kind of turn out like this one. They're all a little different, so exactly, I've just been used to it. I'm sure some of you have been used to your dollar store acrylic paints, or maybe you upgrade and got some Amsterdam acrylics or whatever. Whatever you use a lot, I'm sure it's quite easy to get attached to. So I really hope these guys never go out of business. Looking online for some paint, Cindy? Yeah, to order the Blick, I'd recommend. Again, even though I haven't used them, I've heard from enough people that I can confidently recommend them. If you want something especially similar to what I use. They're not going to be the best paints, of course, but they might be the best for you. And I think they're relatively cheap. I don't know what different sizes they come in, but if you want to go value economy there and buy big jugs to have for years, then go for it. I would say they're a good one. Sennelier acrylic student paints, nice coverage. I've never heard of them, Marion. Do you get that at Michael's or somewhere else? I hope so, Jen. Yeah. Especially for those who maybe felt like they couldn't really afford, you know, things at the start there. Hopefully this sale does them well. And if not, again, my goal is to just, you know, kind of clear out the shop a little bit, get some inventory out so I can have some room for more of a vibe, more of a different vibe that I'm going to be going for in the next couple months. I'm just more excited for that part, honestly. The sale's like a little gift to you guys, but I just more so want space so I can thrive a little differently, you know? I want to revamp that place, that whole website. All right, speaking about the painting again here, you can see I'm starting to slowly move over to the middle. And you can see if you really, again, kind of squint at my original, I said that there's less darkness over here, but there's still a fair amount. It's just kind of underneath everything. So it's still important that we add these dark splotches, even though in general it's going to be lighter over here with lighter greens. So keep using that same color. I'm just mixing the same one. I've just kind of run out on my plate here. If you see me furiously mixing with my brush, I've just run out and I need more. And again, you can keep adding here. You don't need to add quite as much. I would recommend, if anything, you can go in maybe like bigger blobs, just less of them. That way you have little pockets of darkness that you can work around. So you can see not as much doing one stroke, instead doing a few strokes in the same spot. And again, slowly covering up. It won't be quite as covered as over here, but you'll still see a fair amount of the dark greens kind of poking through. And I'm kind of reloading my brush almost every time, every few strokes. If I do a little batch of strokes, you can see I go back down, dip into more paint. Just goes on a little smoother when you have a fresh amount of paint on your brush, when you have a freshly applied paint to your brush. You can get some more solid brush strokes, right? If you're really scraping the paint and you have a little amount of paint, here's what's gonna happen. You'll start to see kind of like this. That's not great. Not great for this painting anyway, has its time and place, but we want thickness. We want some deep, dark coverage. So really make sure you're using a good amount of paint on your brush, just reapplying the paint every few strokes if you can. That's why I have my palette right here for easy grabbing. Not reaching across somewhere. Did I change greens? No, still the same. This dark green's gonna take a little bit just because it's the first layer, so no worries. No fears, we're still on the same. Oh yeah, acrylic apple barrel, haven't heard of them. Still the same green, sorry if I'm missing those questions a little late there. Still on the same green, just different placement. Different placement for the same green. And again, I'll do my best to keep really notifying you when I change things or move to another step, but just know, again, because this painting is just a lot of layers, a lot of using lighter and lighter greens, you can really, maybe even after a couple of steps, just kind of go on your own path. Add your dark green, make it lighter, make it lighter, make it lighter. Just if maybe you're a little quicker than me, or you just want to get to some lighter greens, make it a bit brighter. Again, no rule that says you gotta do exactly what I'm doing. But yeah, I'm gonna stay on this dark green for a little while longer here. Just want to make sure I get some good pockets on the right-hand side as well. You do, Charlene? Is it a nice big tall one like me? Or is it a like a table one? Table ones are nice too. Little fold outs. You get online, Desserres has them. They are based in USA, been making paint for 250. Okay, 250 years. Yeah, Desserres is another good trusted one. Another one that I haven't used myself, but I know others who have shopped through them. I think I bought canvases for them at one point and they were pretty good. So I mean, if that translates. When I say pretty good though, I also just mean like cheaper. I feel like they're more of a value brand as well. If you're buying the Desserres, I think there's Desserres brands that they have. I think they have their own paint, kind of like Blick, right? Like they're an art store, but they have their own brand within. Pretty sure. But yeah, whatever canvases they were selling, I was buying the cheapest ones, and they're very good. Actually nicer than the Michaels ones, in my opinion. The great values. Sometimes the great values can be a little thin. I've definitely opened a 5-pack and I find one that's a little ripped right in the middle. And I'm like, how did this happen? How did you sneak in the middle of this 5-pack? I don't know. Michaels is always very kind about replacing them, but obviously it's still a disappointment when you see it, when you first open your fresh pack of canvases and you're like, one of them's gone? Okay. Some of your blue strokes look like butterflies. Kind of. I was honestly pointing out like almost hearts here, not pointing them out, but in my head I was like, aw. Aw. How cute. Okay, and then last little thing I'll say about placement. I would say I go a little heavier just in this bottom right-hand corner. I think I was saying before, but this is where our branch is going to come from, like our cherry blossom branch, kind of from down here. So my idea was that maybe the light greens kind of go a little more higher up a little more kind of middle and right here, because it'll be the ends of the branches, right? The starts of the branches are more of like the trunk area, which would be off of the canvas. Probably a little more darkness, probably a little more like background greens showing through. So you can go maybe a little heavier with the same green, just in that bottom right-hand area. So I'll just kind of make some bigger blobs, get them a little closer together. Just a little more similar to what we were starting with on the left here. Oh, you did, Jen! Oh, man. Yeah, I don't recognize the name, but maybe you have mentioned it before. A nice tall one, Charlene? I really like the tall canvas. I used to use the little fold-out kind of table ones, but I don't know what it is about the tall one. Makes me feel a little more professional. Anything to boost the confidence, right? If it's a tall easel that gets you there, then that's perfect. Again, I'm just remixing the same green. If it looks a little different, it's simply because I haven't mixed the exact same green. I'm trying to get it as close as possible. But again, if you see any differences right now, it's just because it's difficult to mix the exact same green every time. As long as it's a dark green, though, you're good. We're gonna have so many greens on here by the end anyway. Yeah, especially right in this corner. Let me really cover it up. Oh, and I'll also mention too, there's no rule that says you can't go backwards with your greens or any colors that you're using. There's no rule that says we can only use dark green now and never again. We have to get lighter. No, you can always go back and re-add some colors. In fact, I'm sure I did that in my original, maybe closer to the end. You know, I was looking at everything and saying, it looks a little too light over here. Maybe I'll add a little more darkness back in. Again, nothing wrong with that. But if you kind of add dark green as your last color, you might kind of almost see the strokes overlapping, and that might get a little confusing, you know, as the viewer. You're kind of like, wait, I thought the shading was in the background, but it looks like it was applied on top. You might notice it if you do it a lot. But if you do it here and there, no one's gonna notice it, just a couple little splotches. So that is why we're going in that order. That's why we're going dark to light, so it looks like the light is quite literally on top of the dark colors. But again, if we need to go back and re-add a little here and there, I won't tell anybody if you don't. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Nothing is definite, nothing is, you know, last chance. We're just doing our best to get as much on here for now so that we don't have to, like, revisit it later, right? It's also a little annoying to have to go back and redo things that you've already done, so it's always my goal to just do them the first time and then we can just focus on the next steps later. Yeah, look, heart. Just the two little brush strokes. Heart. Butterfly. Very cute. Okay. Again, you'll never really know when you're exactly done, but I think that's pretty good for me. I'm just going to put my brush down so you can kind of see it all together. I'll give you all maybe another minute or two to keep adding that first green, and then I'll move you to a lighter green, and then a lighter one and a lighter one. There are many stores that carry the paint. Sarah says their own line as well. There you go. Tri-Art. Right. Tri-Art's good too. I've used Tri-Art in a pinch. When I couldn't find the Start Academic, sometimes it was sold out at Curry's. Again, because sometimes they had some stock issues. And yeah, Tri-Art was pretty good. I have an art chair. It hurts my back. Oh no, I have just a computer chair. Yeah, I never thought to invest in like an art specific chair. Honestly, I just use a computer chair and get it all painty. Use a tabletop one, half my L-shaped. Yeah, it's good for space, obviously, if you don't have the space for one that can fit on the ground. And for smaller canvases too, especially, like, you don't need a huge one, right? Depending on sizes that you're using. That would be so nice, Shay. I believe. Oh, and yeah, Jen says I had a TV dinner tray I use. I still use a TV dinner tray. That's what all of my brushes and this palette rests on. If it's not on my knee, which is directly below here, it's over here, whoops, on the TV dinner tray. Yeah. It's actually kind of scary because the thing has, it's held up by one, like, arm. And while I've been moving the TV dinner tray with nothing on it, that arm has just unhooked and the whole thing is swung down. And I was like, if there was anything on this right now, it would have been a terrible mess. So honestly, I use this thing in fear. It is currently holding my heavy volcano plate and brushes and such. And I just pray that it won't unhook itself. I won't lift it up the wrong way for it to unhook and go everywhere. So yeah, TV dinner tray is good for the meantime, but I don't recommend it as a long-term solution for that reason, unless you have a high-quality dinner tray that does not do what I just described. Yeah, garage sale. I bet a Facebook marketplace would do you good for any art supplies, I'm sure. I think people are always kind of decluttering and clearing out, and if they feel like art isn't for them, then they'll be selling it for cheap. Yeah, Charlene, I know you've mentioned that. That's always a good thing. Very good. Oh, yeah? That's so sweet, Charlene. Do you know, like, the design you're going to do quite yet, or still planning that? Hey, Todd. We are toot lovers here. We love our tutorials. Welcome in. Ergonomic multi-plane tripod. No. Do you have a link to that, Marion? If you post it in the Discord, I'd love to take a look at it. See if maybe one of the ones. Oh, I got you, Charlene. Okay. Gotcha. I thought you meant you were like making a painting for the fundraiser. I see. That's great. So you've chosen one already. Good for you. That sounds more sturdy, Marion. Yeah, I would love to check it out. I could even just Google it too, the way you described it. Ergonomic multiplane. Not that I need another easel, but I'm always curious about what's out there. Oh, there's like a top piece almost, and you can like flatten. That's interesting for people who maybe like pouring or just don't like more of a straight up and down. That's kind of cool. Probably good for photo taking too, honestly. Okay. Thank you, Marion. Thank you. Yeah, I just looked up what I think it is, but I'd love to see the one that you're referring to specifically. I know, Shay. I love looking at art supplies I don't need and shouldn't be spending money on. Ah, yes. Don't we all? Okay, so not to rush, but I'm gonna move us on to another green here. Again, if you're still working on your dark green, I would just keep going until you think you have a good amount of dark green. Again, something similar to what you see here. It doesn't have to be the exact amount, of course. But I'm gonna start moving on to a new green here. So I'm actually going to use the same area that I mixed my very dark green in, because it already has the blue, the black, the yellow. And I'm just going to pile in a little more yellow. And you can see it's still going to be kind of dark, a little more, what was the word I was using before? Like a dirty, kind of musty color. But we're getting a little lighter. See how that green's kind of showing up a little bit better. And I'm using yellow to lighten because I find it still keeps the green within this kind of like mossy, dirty range. If I were to use white, again, I find it kind of brightens it up a little bit too much. Just not the green I want for this painting, you know? It's still a nice green, but I like to use yellow to lighten it. I am re-adding a little blue and black just to keep it a little darker. I found my paint was getting a little too light. But yes, I would start piling in that yellow. Even compared to the blue, there's going to be lots more yellow at this point, and if you need to kind of redarken, I'd be adding more black to it just to keep it, like I keep describing, more of the dirty tone. It's almost like we're going for like an olive color rather than like a forest green, you know? Want it more toned down. So again, that black is going to help with that. And if the black makes it too dark, you can add a little more yellow to make it a little lighter. Still using the medium round brush as well. Take your time mixing too. Just get a nice color that you're vibing with. Because we'll be using lots of it, right? So get it right, and then you can just relax and apply it all on there, one stroke at a time. Sometimes I like to wash my brush off. If you just noticed that there, I kind of did a lot of mixing and then I did a quick wash. That's because as you're mixing, the paint is really getting pent up in your brush there. I should have showed it beforehand, but after I was done mixing, the brush was like exploding with paint. It was like poof, super thick, you know? So just to kind of get it back to its nice kind of pointed shape, I just washed it off. And that way I can now just kind of dip into the color that I've already made here. And you can see, obviously, the brush gets a little thicker, but it's not like loaded up with paint. There's not paint within the bristles, misshaping the brush. I can now just apply it as much or as little as I want. Okay, so I would say this green is still pretty dark. It's just lighter than the old one. Oh, I might need to lighten it a little bit more, actually. Put a little blob on. Compare it to your old green. If it doesn't look any different, I would lighten it up a little more. A little more yellow for me. A little more yellow for me. I was too liberal with my darker black there. Okay, I'm good with this. So yeah, I'm seeing a minimal difference, but as long as you're seeing a difference on yours, that's good. And I'm just doing the exact same thing. So I'm just using my medium round brush. I'm still doing my little tiny brush strokes, trying to twist my wrist a little bit as I go so I get them all different directions. And you can see now I'm really starting to fill up, really starting to fill those gaps, especially on the left-hand side. I would say at this point my goal is to hit most, if not all, of the gaps, because I'll probably only add maybe one, maybe two shades of green remaining. So I want to make sure I'm kind of covering my bases as much as possible, just so I'm not worried about it later with my lighter greens, right? So again, really kind of, again, finding those little gaps. And I'll say again, there's no need to be exact with, you know, filling up the gap like this. You can just splotch it on, splotch it on, splotch it on. Everything will be fine. If again you cover up a little more blue or split up a little blue section, that's all okay. If anything, it's really good to be overlapping the blue because it just makes it a little more natural. If you were to start going around the perimeter of the blue might not look like the sky anymore. It almost might look like it's part of the tree, you know? It might look like it's almost more foreground if you do that. So purposely covering up the blue, even in small amounts, is actually a very good thing. It allows those little leaves to rest on top. See how that's changing? It's almost becoming like a whole new layer on top of the blue. So we're getting that sky pushed back, we're getting the greens in front. Took us a little bit to get there, but as we can see, again, the steps aren't hard, it's just doing a lot of little brush strokes. It's just a time-consuming one, this one, but worth it for sure, as it always is, hopefully. And if I didn't say it too, there's no rule about covering up your darker green as well. So if your new lighter but still dark green covers up your first dark green, that's okay too. You might get some overlapping there, and again, it all adds to making the painting look a little more believable and realistic, because all these layers, they're not going to be separate, right? They're not all going to be in their exact same little or exact little gaps and areas. They're all going to be overlapping as you add. That's what layers do, right? All right, already it's getting really covered up, which is good. Don't forget my edges. I preached about the edges and I'm forgetting about those edges. The edges should be so easy in this one too. Just, you don't even have to look really. You could just do a couple little strokes. And I'm sure you'll end up covering the gaps just by guessing. All right, and you can see I'm slowly moving, as I did before, a little more into the middle. And we're kind of treating this the same way in that we want our darks to be a little more to the left, a little more in this bottom right corner. But because we're getting a little lighter with this color, I would say add maybe a little more than before. You can just do kind of the similar idea of adding larger batches of them, starting to kind of perimeter the blues a little bit, overlapping a bit. But yes, you can start to bring this into the middle just as you did the other green. I just still wouldn't go very heavy with it, just a little sparse again. How often do you clean your brush when you're using? Oh, that's a good question. I'll try to kind of make note when I do it. I feel like I'm cleaning it every time I have to make the color again because I keep running out. Like, I'm just getting to the stage now. It's hard to tell on the volcano plate, but there's not a lot of paint here. These bumpies are from the dried paint underneath, and I'm kind of scraping at this point. So at this point, I would say I'm going to clean off my brush to mix a new color. Same color, I should clarify. I'm mixing the same color, just a new batch of it. And then I'll wash it when I'm done mixing it. I always definitely wash when I'm done mixing, as I said before, because the brush gets kind of loaded up with paint otherwise. But otherwise, if I had like an infinite amount of paint that I was using here, I don't know if I'd be washing it off a whole lot because I don't find my brushes getting like caked up and loaded up with paint. The paint isn't really going into the bristles, it's just kind of resting on top. So I washed it off there, I'm applying my paint. I'll try and note when I wash it next. Maybe I'm doing it without noticing, but I think that's my answer. Bittersweet, we haven't switched since this new step, so this is now the second green. Hope that's clear. So we've done this very deep dark green. I'm now adding this still dark but slightly lighter green. You can see almost more of a yellow tone in it. Yep, still the let's call it the medium green. This one's tough because there's so many greens we're using. Usually when I do paintings like this with a few layers, there's like a dark, a medium, and a light. And this is like a couple darks, a couple mediums, a couple lights, so I apologize. I should be naming these a bit better, but yeah, second green. Second green. Yeah, green, green 2. Yeah, something like that. Maybe we'll just number them. That might be good. And I will be honest, I don't have an exact number of greens that I use. I just kind of go until I feel like, you know, I've reached the lightest green that I want. And like I said, there's probably just a couple of each, either dark, medium, or light within that. So don't worry, I don't have an exact number you should be using. Just giving a good estimate based on what I used with my last painting there. Yeah. I understand though, you wanting to know exactly what I'm using, so no worries. Keep asking. If I forget to say anything, I'm happy to repeat or just, yeah, or say it, answer. And again, hopefully we can get to that feeling, you know, we can get to a space where after mixing so many greens, maybe you yourself can start to say, oh, like maybe I'll make a decision. Like, do I want another green? Do I want to make a really light green next? I think we'll be able to get a good sense of that after this, right? Or maybe you paint this one and for a different painting you try out, you start to, yeah, make those decisions. Because in the end, again, we don't need exact amounts. It's always going to be different every time. Okay, so there's Shay. I didn't even wash off my brush. I just wanted a bit more water. So I still haven't washed it this whole time since we last checked in. I felt like I think I wet it naturally because my paint is once again getting low. So I was like, I want a little more water to kind of salvage what I have left. But didn't wash it. It's interesting trying to clock specific things like that, things that I probably do a little more, what would you say? Just like naturally or without knowing. Subconsciously is the word. And then placement, again, we're using still green number 2. This is a good idea to number the the green's green too. Still doing the same thing. I've now moved over, you can see, to the right-hand side of the canvas, and I'm pretty much still treating this like the very dark green we started with. I'm just adding a sparse amount in the middle, and then I'm going to start caking it up in that bottom right area just to really start to cover it up, just like I did on the left here. See how it fades right into nothing? That's just what we're looking for. Thanks, Bob. That will apply when we add a couple more light greens. The dark ones will look like they're fading into nothing. So thank you, Bob. On point as always. Once again, I, subconsciously dipped in the water. That's just to grab more paint. And again, I think that's just to salvage what I have. Because I don't want the paint watery. I just want to be able to pick up a little more, and I find a wet brush is able to do that when it's a little, like, thinner on the plate, right? So. Good little test. Because, yeah, the more water you add, if you can even see what's happening here, it's like the paint itself gets thinner, and then the canvas shows through more, and it almost looks like it's a lighter green as a result. But that's the same green I've been using. It's just thinner now. Because I'm just running out a little bit. I get worried about wasting paint. I let my bristles get more clogged. I see, I see. I mean, I think that's an okay habit, you know? There's nothing wrong with not wanting to waste paint. You could, Shay, like, roll the brush like that before you wash it off if you're worried about the waste in the brush. You could try and, like, squeeze it out by rolling. It's not doing a good job because I have barely any paint on there, but yeah, you could salvage a bit extra if you're worried about washing it all away. Because I can appreciate that. Don't want to wash away the big clump that's in there. The only issue is, like, we can't use that clump until it's out of the brush, right? Or else it's just going to stay in the brush. It doesn't do us much good. Okay, once again, I think I'm reaching the stage where I've added enough of my second green. So I think I'll just try my best to put my brush down. You can see what I have here, just if you're comparing to your own, comparing amounts. Again, if you have more than this, that's absolutely fine. If you have less than this, I would suggest adding a little bit more, just so you're not going back to the dark green later. But any more than this is fine, because we're just going to keep piling things on top. You'll just have to pile your other greens on top of your darker greens as a result. So yeah, no big deal. Yeah, Bob's great. We don't use that Bob quote enough anymore. I always forget it's there. That's unintentionally deep. We can't use the clump and lets us off the brush. We can't use the clump if it's deeply embedded within the brush. We must release the paint. Apply it the way we want. Prep the brush. Honestly, kind of, Jen. It's a little bit of, like, planning ahead. Not hastily, you know, using something or doing something because it's there. We gotta keep it in mind. We gotta prep its little applicant here. Think about where it's being placed. We're not just squishing it on. I think the solution is to worry less. That's fair, that's fair. But yeah, the squishing helps too. Squishing and rolling. I don't do it as much about a wasting paint thing. It's more like, I want the color, and I'm running out of the color, so I'm like, the last bit! Please! Because yeah, color matching can be a pain. It's not as big of a deal with this painting, because all the greens kind of meld together in a way. But yeah, with paintings where you're like using specific colors, you're like, no! Okay, just giving one more minute here before I move on to green number 3, which I would say is more of like our medium green tone. I'll be doing something a little bit different with this one, but I'll tell you about that in the next minute or so. Take a little drink of something if you haven't recently. I've been drinking my water, so I'm reminding everybody as well, drink your water. Stay hydrated. Time can really pass quickly when you're painting. It happened just the other day, yesterday. It was like 4 or 5 hours. And I was like, what? Where did the time go? Got some good work done, but still, it can really escape you in a good way, but also take care of yourself. Yeah, don't drink the paint water. Always a good reminder that I don't remind often enough. This is why I now drink out of straw cups, or I always have. As I've been streaming, I've learned this very quickly. The paint water is open top. Drinking cup is straw. It's much harder to mix up, and more importantly for me, much harder for me to dip my brush into my drinking cup if there's a nice lid on it. That's more what I do. I never have really... I'm sure I have, but it wasn't common for me to drink the paint water. It was always the opposite. No, it's not. None of my bun stickers. These are just little characters. I don't know if it's like collaboration chat time with BT21. I'm not aware. But they're cute. Maybe it is a bun, but not my bun. Maybe that guy? Not sure. They're cute little guys, though. And they change colors when they have a cold drink in them. I guess my water isn't cold enough. Okay, I have a couple things to say about our next green in terms of placement, in terms of mixing. So I'm going to start with that here. So just to be clear, we're moving on to green number 3. And again, if you're still on green number 2 or even green number 1, keep going. Going as long as you like. I can always repeat things if you have questions. What I've done here is I've washed off my medium round brush as usual, just to get a clean brush before I mix, and then I'll wash off again. I'm now mixing what I would call a medium green, so I'm going to add more yellow to either my existing green or just to another blue, black, yellow mixture. So I'm using those same 3 colors, blue, black, yellow. Just making sure I'm using lots more yellow to get it a little bit lighter than before. And again, I would say I'm aiming for like a medium green now. So at this stage, I find that because we're using so much yellow, my paint color starts to get a little transparent, which is something I don't want, because I like when the paint, at least in this painting, kind of sticks on top of our old paint. I want to cover up things. I don't want my leaves to be transparent to the point where I see the dark leaves behind them. Just not in this painting. So what I do at this point, I know I said earlier I don't really add white, but I do add white for the purpose of transparency. I'm adding a little bit of white to my mixture. So that's 4 colors in here now. That's blue, yellow, black, and white, which seems really redundant and silly, but they're all in there for a purpose. Adding the white I find helps with the transparency issue. I find it allows the paint to kind of stick on top a little bit easier. So I'm going to throw that in there. So I will let you know, maybe you don't have this issue. Maybe you have a different paint than mine, a different higher quality paint. Never drink the paint water, I know. Maybe you have a higher quality paint, maybe you find your yellow isn't transparent. I find my yellow's transparent is just an issue, and I find the fix is adding a little bit of white. So I'm not really adding white for the sake of lightening the color. It's more so for transparency. So you can see I tried to add just a little smidgen so it's not like lightening the whole thing, because I still want to use yellow to lighten it. It gets it more like a mossy color as a result. Okay, so a little white in there. We're switching now, so this is green number 3, bittersweet green number 3. Going a little lighter. Yep, I would say this is our medium green tone. But yes, just anything lighter than your last one is the goal. Something like that. I'll put it on the... Here, there's a comparison. So yeah, still darker, but... Yeah, I'm just looking on the monitor. Yeah, like a nice medium. It's like, it's very olive at this point. Before we were very dirty, now we're more olive tone. Okay? And again, that was blue, yellow, black, and a little bit of white, the white being for transparency. I still want to use the yellow to lighten the color, so I add the white in kind of at the end just to help the paint stick a little bit better. And see, yeah, see how it's sticking on top? When I say sticking, I don't mean like literally staying there. I mean coverage. Like that little blotch, you can't see through it. If I didn't add the white, I would have seen through it and it would have been upsetting. Okay, so I also have a couple things to say about placement for this color. For the most part, it's pretty straightforward, but I do something a little particular in the dark area with this color. I don't just randomly splotch this all over. What I start to do is I splotch it more in little groups or sections. What I do is I kind of pick out, you know, larger areas of dark green. So maybe let's look at here. Okay, right here. And what I like to do is I like to pile on this new green number 3, kind of like on the top part of it, just loose. But you can see how I kind of covered up the top part, right? And this is just a shape that I made myself. You know, I pointed out this blob. I was like, there's a blob of leaves right here. I took my brush, I did a couple brush strokes of this new green, and you can see what it's doing. It's almost highlighting this section of leaves. It's almost like there's a little bit of light green on top of the big pile of leaves rather than just one. And I find that starts to help shape out almost like clusters or clumps of leaves. So here's another potential blob. I'm just gonna do a couple extra strokes along the top edge. So covering up some of the dark green, just going right on top. And hopefully you can see how it's almost looking like it highlights a bunch of leaves rather than just piling on a new leaf. We're kind of using this as more of a highlight now. So again, you can find these blobs anywhere. They don't need to be segregated blobs from all the others. You can just literally, with your eyes or with your finger, just kind of say, here's one. Pile on a couple of these strokes, more than a couple, maybe 5 to 10. Cover up that top area, and now you have like a highlighted bunch. So that's what I like to do with this green, at least in the dark area. We will switch back to our usual just quick brush strokes as we move more to the right. But I found this was a nice technique for the dark area, just to give a little more shape to the dark area. It's not just random leaves everywhere. This kind of allows us to see, again, like I said, more like little bunches of leaves. Little clusters, things like that. They can be small blobs, they can be large blobs. The point is that I'm trying to pile on this new color in small little batches or sections to act as a highlight. Hopefully you see that coming through. So rather than just separated, they are more segregated into small little batches. Yeah, do not set your paint on fire. Yeah, no kidding. No worries, Bittersweet. You keep asking. As you can see, chat's always very lovely and helpful. Sometimes they get to questions quicker than me. I would trust them. They're all good people. No one's trying to goof around or fool you. Sometimes I just get a little locked into painting mode and don't look at the chat for a minute or two. Thank you, Jen. So yeah, green number 3. If we're numbering the paint colors, that was again a good idea. We're on paint number 3. Green number 3. All right, and because I covered up pretty much this whole section with my dark greens, there's maybe like tiny little hints of white coming through. Maybe I can be really picky and get those guys with this new color. Because again, it's okay if we have some little individual strokes of this green. There's no rule that says we can't. I'm just gonna very carefully go around, make sure getting all those tiny little bits, just tapping my brush just a tiny amount. You can even leave this for the end if you'd prefer, if you'd like to go back in later on and just kind of take a medium to dark green and just poke around. You can do that, but I kind of like to do that as I go, I find. All right. Oh, thanks for the lurk, Jen. All right, and then as I move over to the right, I'm kind of abandoning this whole highlighting idea. I'm abandoning the whole clustered paints again. And I'm just gonna start filling in again. Same as before, I'm just doing individual brush strokes, kind of twisting my wrist and trying my best to cover up gaps. Again, overlapping here and there, but trying to stick more to the white canvas areas. So yeah, no rhyme or reason here, just simply covering up. I would once again add maybe a little more of this green than you did your other previous greens, your 2 other greens, just because we are looking to get this a little lighter in general. So you can really start to pile this on a little bit more, and then once we get to the really light greens, we'll really pile those on. And I do say this for every painting that I do, or at least I try to remember to say it, but if you're ever feeling like things are looking a little mixed up, you're kind of like lost in the painting, you're like, I don't even know what's going on anymore, take a little break and like look at the painting from a little bit of a distance. Take a step back or roll your chair back, whatever you're in. Push it back a bit and have a look from a distance. It really helps you see the whole thing in general, especially this painting where there's so many greens piled on top of one another. It can look kind of just like a mess. But as long as you've been following the general instructions here in terms of the dark areas, the lighter areas that we're putting in, you will start to see some shapes starting to form, or more of like indications of foreground versus background, where, you know, everything's going to be a little more lighter, a little more pushed up towards you, a little more of a shape of like an eventual, you know, tree branch where all the nice light colors are forming. So yeah, you might not see that shape quite yet because we still have a little bit of green to go. But after, I would say, this shade or the next one, you should be able to kind of move your chair back and start to see like transitions of dark to light, and the idea of this like very foreground bunch all in here. But yeah, do that at any time. Another thing you can do is always take a photo on your phone or whatever device you have close to you, because what that does is creates a nice small picture to look at. You can see the whole thing just in a small space. So it helps you see the entire design rather than looking this close and needing to dart your eyes everywhere to kind of comprehend everything. But yeah, try not to overthink it. I find that helps, or that happens with overthinking. You start to say, I can't see what I'm doing. I'm worried. I don't trust what I'm painting here. Try and push those worries aside. It's really hard to see, you know, the finished product amongst all these little mini stages. I know we're always anxious to see the finished product, but it's a nice feeling to try and let go of that worry in the middle. Again, promotes more of the like enjoyment from the process rather than the finished product as well. Obviously, we all want a beautiful painting at the end, but sometimes painting is just enjoyment throughout, right? Just the enjoyment of concentrating on something artistic, mixing some colors, learning about colors. I wet my brush there, I didn't wash it. I'm still trying to note that. So yeah, in that case, even if you don't get a finished product you like, you can at least hopefully be a little more confident for next time, or at least say you walked away enjoying the few hours that you were painting. A nice de-stressor, a nice disconnect. Such a soothing too for coming off from being sick. I'm glad it's a nice mix of, hopefully a mix of challenge, but soothing, relaxing, just, again, just filling up spaces. It is kind of like a coloring book, this one, like the whole adult coloring book phase of just filling in things. I feel like we're almost doing that, like our lines are our spaces to color are just the white, right? We're just filling in the white. We're thinking a little bit about placement and a little bit about color, but really, as we're within each step, it's just like plopping it on some white, filling up the space, coloring it in. It's also such appropriate time. I know! It just turned pink in Animal Crossing. That's so sweet. Yeah, yesterday I was out and I saw probably not the first cherry blossoms of this season, but like the first like larger amount. It was very exciting. Like lots of big trees like fully blooming, and I was like, whoa! It happened so fast. Like even within a week, it was like, oh, maybe there's an indication of a couple budding, and now it's like, ba-boom! So beautiful. Yeah, I actually took a picture that reminded me of this painting. I was like, oh my gosh, we're kind of doing that tomorrow. We're kind of painting this in a way. It was kind of looking up through some trees and seeing the sky in the background. I was like, what the heck? It's like we're making it. Okay, I think I'm getting there. I might add a little more. It seems like there's a lot of white still in here, so I'm just going to continue adding the same color. Again, I'm still on green number 3. Just gonna fill in some larger gaps that I see. I'm still not worried about filling in every gap, but you can see how in closing up maybe like these edges a little bit. I should work a little more down here actually. I want to point out this. See what's happening here? I'm skimping on my paint. I'm trying to scrape those last little bits, and what's starting to happen is when I paint on top, you can kind of see the white space and the space that I'm trying to cover, the dark green that I'm trying to cover. I don't want that. I want this whole stroke to be consistent. I don't want to see this little blotch of white in here. That's where it starts to get a little messy, is if you start kind of just quickly applying, and you can start to see the transparency and the white spots and all that. So I need to remix some paint. If you see that happening too, I would make sure you're piling on a little more paint on your brush so you can really get a nice solid coverage. Because that's where things might get a little muddy or messy, is when the transparency starts to happen. It doesn't look like whole shapes are on top. It just looks like little, you know, windows are on top almost. So if you feel like that's happening, just take a moment to remix some of your paint. Maybe add a little more white in there just to help with that transparency. Maybe you're having the same issue that I do with my yellow. And then you can keep going. Take a little pause. Mix, mix, mix. Get my medium olive green back. Lots of yellow, little blue, little black, little white. Here's the difference. Hopefully this shows up. So I got big pile. Now it's a one solid object, one solid shape. The lighting didn't do me justice there. Let me show you this one. So that was using the little amount of paint, lots of transparency. No longer, no longer, no longer. These are now solid shapes on top of the dark areas and on top of the white. See how it just smoothly covers it. Okay, so try and make sure that's always happening. It even happened a little in here. I see a lot of transparency there. But yeah, I would say that's a pretty big key, so watch out for that. You might not notice it as much now, but I find near the end of the painting, if you've been doing a lot of those quick transparent strokes, you'll start to be like, oh, it just doesn't look as clean. You just don't see the brush strokes as well, the leaf shapes as well. So yeah, look out for that. And that'll be more important with the lighter colors. So if you're seeing a little bit of it, I wouldn't panic too much. I just wanted to clean up that one area. I shouldn't be going over everything. But if you think about it, it really does matter more for the lighter colors, because those are the ones that are on top of everything, right? These are all going to be slightly covered here and there, or most of them will be. So if you have little inconsistencies or imperfections, that's totally fine. It's always fine, but yeah, for this painting in particular, we just want to really get our habits right for the light green colors we'll be using. How long have I been painting for? In general, Tubbs? That's always a tough question, but I'll do my best to answer. It's gonna be a long answer though. I've been painting all my life. I know that's the cheat answer to say, all my life. My whole history is that I've always, you know, loved painting, loved anything artistic, creative, I would say, my whole life. I started just messing around with acrylics, I would guess grade 6, 5, something like that. I would say grade 6 actually. Grade 6 is when I started having weekly art classes at school. Prior to that, I would have like 1 week of more like in-depth artistic instruction. My school had a local art teacher come in for like art week, and it'd be like the best week of the year. So I learned from that 1 week, and then otherwise it would be the basics like kindergarten, you're putting your fingers in paint, whatever. But yeah, grade 6, 7, 8, I went to a school that had the same local art teacher, but she was coming once a week, and I was like, yes! So I really got more experience then. In high school, I took art whenever I could, which was probably once a semester or once a year even. Learned different things there, painting, drawing, whatever. Continued to do it as a hobby for myself during that time. University, I took business, did not take any art electives because I didn't see them offered, but I still continued as a hobby myself. And then shortly after university is when I started teaching art. I did that for about 7 years because I was a teacher and then I managed. Pandemic hit and I've been painting online ever since. So from that analysis, I'd say professionally, coming up like 10 years-ish, because I did the 6 or 7 in-person teaching and now I've done like 2 or 3 online. So like 10 would be the longer, yeah, the more liberal guess. But technically all my life, yeah. Just moving more from like a hobby to career, or hobby to more serious learning or passion over the last 10. Yeah, hope that was a good answer. I know I over-explained, but there you go. All right, I've now reached the stage where I think I have enough green again. You can see my gaps are closing up, but mostly I've been focused on the left-hand side. You can see maybe the first third is all covered up. This corner is pretty covered. Maybe some like outside edges are a little more covered. You can see almost what's starting to form here, this area where all our light green is going to occur. Think about it, our branch is coming from over here. The branch is going to come up here, and all its nice little light blossoms and light greens are going to be all kind of along that branch there. So you can see how it's starting to take shape a little bit, but it's really going to start to pop when we add our light greens on top. Just taking a quick minute and then I'll move on to a new green. And as I said, there's no particular number that's like mandatory, but my guess at this point is I'm probably going to do, I think, 2 more greens just for anybody trying to keep track here. So I think we're landing at about 5 greens total. If you happen to have more greens, if you happen to mix a green that's different from your last green, don't panic. I think that's all good. You can add technically these are all different greens. Technically there's going to be more than 5 greens, right? So yeah, if you happen to add an extra one, or maybe you don't need 5, maybe you feel like you have the depth and dimension with just 4, that's totally possible. But I would say 5 is my goal, what I'm aiming for. I'm just grabbing dark green to fix up a couple little transparent spots I'm seeing. Again, I like to do that as I go. If you want to leave that for the end, you can always do that too. So again, you can see I'm breaking the rule here. I'm going back to my dark green, adding that a little on top. But it's for the sake of fixing up some transparency, so I'll let it slide. The problem is I can't really see the transparency until it's fully dry, and then you can start to see like the canvas showing through a bit. So it takes a little time for me to figure that out. There we go, that's better. Small details that I just noticed that probably don't make a big difference, but maybe they do. Cool. Yeah, Tubbs, do you do any art? I know you said you like art streamers. It was a big win that you found me today, which makes me very excited. I don't know if you do any art or practice any art at all, or interested in learning. Yeah, in fact, let me bring up this original here. We can start to see it. I know you have the original on the screen there, but even seeing it in person is quite helpful, I find sometimes. See how we can, if you really start to focus on just the greens, ignore the blossoms, just those greens. See how they're all in here, the light greens rather? They're all kind of arching here. See how we're already creating that arch? It's like we're planning ahead, right? And if we have to move the light greens a little further over or somewhere else, that's fine, but we've almost kind of mapped it out here. We've kind of planned ahead for where they're going, right? Whoops, sorry, microphone. Yeah. So hopefully you can start to visualize what's going on here. Okay, on that note, I'm going to move on to our 4th green. We've added 3 greens. We're adding our 4th green now. So I washed off my brush again, just from habit, really. And once again, just adding more yellow, more yellow to my mixture. There's nothing changing here. Adding more yellow to my mixture. If you need to mix a new area, you can add just a tiny bit of black, tiny bit of blue, and you're adding a large amount of yellow at this point. And again, if you have transparency issues, I would add a little bit of white as well. Again, the white is not meant to totally lighten the green. I want to use yellow to lighten the green. But the white helps with transparency to get a nice clean stroke each time. So try your best to use your yellow to lighten, and then just a little white at the end to mix in there. But here's something I'm going for here. So you can see I'm really going for like a really yellowy green. Again, that's kind of the idea. I don't want these very, very typical greens with like even amounts of yellow and blue. I want it leaning more yellow. Because we started with kind of our dirty tones, I feel like the yellow kind of matches better with that. So this green has tons of yellow at this point. I don't usually do breaks in tutorials. In the free tutorials, you can take a break whenever you like, of course. No rules there. But I personally don't break just so I can have a fluid tutorial all the way through. And you all can choose your breaks whenever you like. Please, if you need a break, take your break, because we're really just doing, again, the same thing 2 times more, just with lighter greens. So I would do that now, if you're feeling like it. Oh wow, we've gone for an hour and a half, so that makes sense. Just mixing a little more, and then I'll show you how to apply this one. Yeah, this is definitely going to go over 2 hours, as I predicted. I think we'll be more 2.5. Do my best there. Okay, I've got my, what I'm going to call a light green. It's technically green number 4. I would say it's the first of our 2 light greens that we're going to add. I'm going to add a lot of this one. Okay, same as before. Nothing has changed. I'm not doing anything fancy with this one quite yet. I will do something a little bit different in a second, but for now I'm going to start, you can see, more in the middle. And honestly, I'm starting more in the middle because that's where my gaps are. I'm really trying to fill up my gaps again before I start to do anything a little more different and fancy. So just doing my little brush strokes, covering up all those little gaps. I think I need to add a little more white because I do see some transparency, so let me fix that. I didn't really wash out my brush either. There we go, that's better. So same idea, just doing your small little brush strokes, twisting your wrist, getting all those different directions, different sizes, maybe some tiny ones, maybe some big ones. I'll get a little more particular in a moment. For now, I'm just filling up a couple of those gaps. More than a couple. Filling up a lot of the gaps. If we're still on the same green number, we're adding white or a bit of yellow now. So I primarily add yellow. If you saw me add a little white, I was explaining before that I add a little white because I find my paint is transparent without the white. The yellow paint in particular is a very transparent paint. If I were to put yellow on top of, you know, the greens here, it would dry pretty much see-through. You would see right through it. So the reason I add white is to help with transparency, but I would say you're adding mostly yellow. Mostly yellow. Yes, yes, there you go. Good, good. Yeah, what I recommended, I think, when I first brought up the white was try just yellow. If you find you're getting transparent strokes, like you're kind of seeing, you know, the difference between the dark areas and the canvas areas, you want to add a little white to it, and that'll help with transparency. At least it has with me, and it seems like with a lot of others who I recommend too, so that's what I would say. But yeah, ideally we're lightening with yellow to get this more like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just a yellowy green. Like, it's not lime. Oof. Yeah, it's not lime, but it's more yellow toned. Rather than like a brighter, like even blue, yellow, green. It just looks a little more natural for my eyes anyway. Leaves being a little more yellow toned. Okay, so I'm still just filling up gaps. It's primarily all I'm looking at here is just the gaps. You can see it's almost creating, excuse me, that nice little arch or that nice section that I was pointing out earlier. And before I move over to the right, I think I'll show you a little bit more of what I do with this color. So to make this look a little more delicate, a little more intentional with our color placement, what I start to do with these lighter colors is I do start to overlap things. So I'm no longer covering up gaps. I will over here, but just looking kind of upper left area and maybe a little to the left. I'm no longer looking for gaps. I've done all the work of covering the gaps. Now I can have some fun. I can just place the green wherever I want. And what I want to do is I want to start kind of sprawling, again, kind of like little clumps or sections out into the dark greens, but a little bit more sparse, a little less, and I would say smaller little bumps or lumps, smaller brush strokes, I guess I should say. So, for example, maybe I'll extend this part out a little bit. It's not going to be a whole row of paint strokes. It's not going to be a solid oval. It's just going to be a little cluster. So let me go here. And I'm doing smaller little brush strokes, kind of like touching and moving a little bit on top of the darker greens. So you can see how it's resting right on top there. Nice and clean. That's a result of my white paint being added. And again, you can cluster them up a bit. There's no rule that says they have to be all separate. I'm kind of combining them a little bit, making them a nice little group. And then ending off before I reach the left-hand side. So they kind of like twinkle away and disappear. It's like the end of the branch, right? There's maybe a couple little leaves hanging on, and it just kind of fades away and disappears, as Bob described earlier. Okay, so it makes it look a little more delicate over here rather than just large splotches everywhere. See how that shape is starting there. And I'll do it again maybe a little lower. I'll just kind of start piling where the green already is. Starting to move it a little bit to the left. Doing smaller little brush strokes, or even just like tapping a little lighter with my brush as I go, because that means less of the bristles will be touching. You'll kind of get the tip touching only. And then ending it wherever you feel. Again, I just try and avoid going all the way to the left, but you can start to reach over a little bit. Again, the layers are really nice. So this just adds the idea of layering. Look at that. See, that's getting a little more delicate, a little more shapely. And the great part about this painting is it's not even like we're planning where our branches will go. You're literally just adding leaves. Like, we don't have to put a branch here later on. It's just a nice big pile that you see. Do you use the latest green to carve out the shapes on the left again? Carve out the shapes. Like what I'm doing now? This is the latest green, yes, yes. The fourth green. This is still the fourth green. I think that's what you're asking, yes, yes. So I was using that fourth green to fill in gaps, and then before I kept moving over, I just kind of moved back to the left again. Erin quotes, done the work. Ah, yeah! Yeah, that's the best part of the painting, in my opinion. There's lots of best parts, but when you feel like you've kind of sketched out your little plan, or you kind of understand what's going on a bit more, you've covered, in this case, you've covered all the background elements, at least in this area here, and then you're like, oh, I don't need to worry about placing things to cover canvas, I'm just placing things to place things. Yeah, Shay, let me know if I misunderstood there, but I think that's what you're asking. This is still green 4. Green number 4. And you can see I'm kind of sprawling them out to the left, but you can also angle them a bit. You can kind of curve these little clusters downwards maybe. Maybe this one goes down here a bit. And again, all I'm doing is just piling on. A little more clustered at the start, and then I described it as like they're twinkling away, so they're just becoming a little more sparse, a little more individual brush strokes until they just eventually stop. Do that once or twice more, and then I think I'll move back over to the right-hand side. You've done the work. And I would say at this point I am doing a little bit of a mix of brush strokes and kind of tapping, because I want those smaller shapes, because I like those small little almost dots at points rather than blobs or leaf shapes. Just to make it, I keep saying delicate, to make it look a little more delicate, the smaller little dots really help with that. Okay, it's coming through. So I'm just going to move back to, it's the same green still. This is green number 4. I'm just going to go back to kind of the filling up the gaps stage. So I'm now moving to the right, not doing anything fancy again. I'm just filling up gaps, making sure my paint is covering, going on nice and clean, reapplying paint as much as possible to my brush, and then doing our larger brush strokes again. I'm not worried about our small delicate ones right now because I'm just using this to fill up some space. So if we haven't caught on, the goal with the greens is to cover up the whole canvas. That's why I'm concentrating so much on this first green, or this first light green shade, to cover up a lot of our canvas. Again, maybe if we have a little bit remaining, that's fine. But for our final green shade, which is coming up next, I want us to have fun with it. I don't want us to worry about using our last green shade to cover up spaces that are remaining, because that light green shade, welcome in, that was S. Bruder, thank you for following. Our last shade, our light green shade, it's really going to be particular spots that we're placing it, so I wouldn't want anyone using that last shade to just for the sake of covering up gaps, right? We should be doing that with our other shades here, our darker shades, or this shade that we're using now. So if possible, I would do my best at this stage to be covering up your gaps that are remaining. Again, if there's any tiny little things, that's okay. But do your best to use this color to cover up remaining gaps all the way across here. And again, if you feel like there's just too many gaps and you're like, ooh, this color's kind of taking over everything rather, you can always go back to an older color, grab a little bit of any remaining dark green on your plate or any medium green that you have, and just maybe use that to fill in a couple extra gaps. Again, no harm in going backwards if you think that's going to help out with keeping things in place and covering things up. All right, just mixing the same color. Again, I'm still on green 4. I'm just mixing more on my plate. Mixing it as similar as possible. There you go! I'm so glad! It only gets better with each paint color, of course, but the last green, you're really going to start to see like exactly where you want the foreground to be, exactly where those highlights start to pop out. That's so exciting! Because yeah, I recognize this painting can really look like a mess for a while, and you're like, what is she doing? It's about the trust. And the more you paint, the more you trust, the more you say, this will be figured out. We got to put down a lot of base layers. And hopefully you can see how the order of things makes sense, right? How this light green is now looking like it's on top of things. Again, it's not a hard rule, but it definitely helps us with depth and the layers that we see. Again, squint your eyes if you're not really seeing it, or even if you're not seeing it on mine, squint your eyes, start to see where that foreground and background is, where those lights and darks are going. I left a lot of gaps here. That's okay, we want it to be nice and light anyway, so I'm not gonna worry too much. The only thing with covering up large gaps with this color is, of course, it's gonna look like big clumps of this color, so if you need to separate those clumps, we can do that with our last color coming up, or again, you can go back in with dark greens and just kind of dot a couple in there, and that'll help kind of split up the larger sections if you don't like the larger sections. If you'd rather it look, again, a little more delicate, a little more complicated, you could just take a dark green and just tap, 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 tap a bit, separate them up a bit more. Same with the blue. Again, I'll point out the blue. It's like we've almost forgotten that there's blue on this painting with the amount of green talk we've been having, but we still have those little blue spots, and hopefully you can kind of see with your eyes now how they look like it's the sky in the background. If you feel like they've been too covered up and you want a little more of that sky poking through, again, you can re-add blue. I would wait for the green to dry, of course, first. But you can absolutely add those. And then you can either decide to pile on a little green just to make them look a little more in the background again, or if you want to just leave them if there's only a couple you're adding. Don't be afraid to use a couple spots of this green number 4 just to trickle into the darker spots, even though, again, I said we want this dark area down here to stay nice and dark. You could trickle just a couple of these little guys on top. Again, it just makes it look like they're kind of fading away, sprinkling away on top. Urban, thank you for following. Welcome in. We're doing a little painting tutorial. If you have any questions about what I'm doing, feel free to ask, but I've got more than a couple people painting along here. And we're just going step by step through a painting. Said yes. I'm doing that more and more as I become more of a Twitch viewer again. I find I'm just out loud answering because I'm so used to streaming. Or I like nod, and I'm like, they can't see me? You think so? Yeah, we have a little follower goal. I don't know if anyone is watching, and I never like to pressure people to follow because, like, you shouldn't follow if you don't want to watch my content, but if you're new here and have been enjoying it, feel free to hit the little purple heart kind of below the screen, bottom right. It just means you're following, and all it means is that you're alerted when I go live. I just have a follower goal right now. We're almost at 4,000 people. And I've told my community we're going to do a special stream when that happens, so they're excited and I'm excited. So, oh, there's one, I think. Thank you. Mari, thank you. Mari from Myrtle. Love that name. Thanks so much. One closer. Glad you enjoy. Again, no pressure. If you're lurking in the background, you're like, I'll never be back. Don't worry about following. Just glad you're here in the meantime. Okay, dang, just like that. We've pretty much covered it up. I'm sure I could be picky and say there's tiny speckle, but I'm going to leave those for now. You never know what our cherry blossoms might cover up, so I might as well not painstakingly go through it right now. I might as well kind of wait to see at the end and then maybe grab a tiny bit of green and fix that up. Okay, so I'm just going to give again a couple minutes as anyone's kind of finishing up with green number 4, and then we'll do green number 5. Last green. At least in my painting. If you want more greens, you can always add more. Oh, you're fine. Thanks. It's not an embarrassment. I just never say it. I never say like, hit that follow button, subscribe today, blah, blah, blah. I've been the viewer for too many years and know how that can come off when you're yelled at to hit a button. But I wasn't yelling, and it was a good thought, so thank you. Before I continue, you better hit that like button. You better turn on the bell notifications. Like, it gets a little, a little repetitive. But it is a fair statement considering I know for tutorials, some people come to Twitch for the first time. Maybe you're here on Twitch for the first time watching me. If so, thank you for popping over here. I know it can be scary and new. Maybe they don't know that to follow, so there you go. If there's one day I don't mind saying it, it's 2 days. And if you're on YouTube, same thing. You can pop over to Twitch. Not just to follow, but to see more art content. Always a good reminder. Just still adding the same green. I'm just goofing off at this point. Just adding small little bits. Nothing in particular. I'm giving you all maybe a minute or two more on the 4th green, and then I'll show you the green number 5. But I am legit excited about the 4K thing. Like, that's gonna be cool. It's just been a while since we've done like a celebration stream for something, you know, an event stream. It's been nice to just kind of not worry about that kind of stuff and not feel pressure. But yeah, it's been a while, so I'm excited to try that again. Hopefully just not get too burnt out by doing it all the time, but again, we'll just stick to very notable milestones and events, and I'm sure I'll be fine. It's really fun planning those. It's just a lot of energy doing them. The stream itself takes a lot out of me, but I love the planning aspect. Do 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 do. Okay, I see we're just at about 2 hours in time length. So I think we're good. Yeah, we're good to be on track for about 2.5 for the whole tutorial still. But I do want to keep my eye on time to make sure I keep us moving. So, I guess I'll load up with some more yellow and then we'll go through that last green that we have remaining. All right, here we go. So again, if you're still on any of the other greens, 1, 2, 3, or 4, keep going, keep going. I'm moving on to green number 5, and this is my anticipated last green I'm using. So I'm going to make this really, really light and bright. Still going to be kind of yellow and almost like a little dirty toned, but it's going to be very, very light and bright at this point. It'll really pop off a lot of the foreground as a result. And again, if you feel like you want to add more greens after this one, or you kind of felt like you missed some in-between greens, maybe some of your greens started to look the same after they dried, feel free at any point to make your own greens go back to other ones, whatnot. But here I go with mine. Using my medium round brush, I'm mixing together yellow, white, a little bit of black, a little bit of blue. We still need to add those in to get a little bit of green. But at this point, this mixture is like 95% yellow with a smidgen of white to help with transparency, and then our blue and black to get the actual green in there. Okay, so just take your time mixing a good chunk of that. We don't add a whole lot of this last color, but still a fair amount, so good to kind of get a nice little pile going. You can see I just kind of rotate around the colors, mix a little bit, see how it looks. You can see I'm still, again, still adding the black because I still want to make it a little more muddy. But it's going to be very light and bright, so a little white in there. I think that's pretty good, actually, right there. Maybe a wee bit more white and yellow. Yeah, and there's no harm with the white lightening. Like, if you find your white is lightening up your color a bit, totally fine. That might happen. I'm just trying to primarily use yellow to get that yellow tone in there. But at this point, because we want a very bright and light shade, you could maybe go a little heavier on that white color. Okay. Here I go. So I really made sure to wash off my brush this time especially, because with this last color, I find it really helps to be a little more delicate with it. We could be a little messier with our other colors, a little more blotchy, with some exceptions, of course. We were going a little delicate over here with that lighter green. But this last green, because it's going to be so light and bright and kind of popping off of everything else, we want to be a little more careful with this one. It's kind of the star of the show in terms of all of the greens, right? It's right on top, so its brush strokes are going to be very prominent on top of everything. So I'm applying the paint again, just kind of using more of the tip, trying not to scoop the paint or really get it in the bristles, just kind of lightly applying it, kind of brushing it on. And then I'm going to do my best to use more of the tip this time. I still use a brush stroke. I still stroke my brush, but using more of the tip so I get all these nice little, almost like dots rather than larger blobs. In terms of where I'm placing these, you can see I'm starting more in the middle of the canvas. I might bring them over a tiny bit to the left, but it's going to be more middle. It's going to be higher up, so maybe traveling over here a bit more, and maybe a little lower down in the middle. So it's almost like, if you remember our arch that we saw, It's almost like we're kind of staying on the top edge of that arch because we got all our light colors here, but our very light colors are going to be right on top here where all that sunlight is theoretically hitting. We don't have a sunshine in the painting, but I would imagine it's kind of like either behind us here, kind of like off to the left a little bit, shining on all the nice foreground elements there. Sound effects help to describe. So yeah, just using much less pressure, trying to focus on more of the tip of the brush and just doing small little strokes with it. Once again, the idea of kind of clustering these guys, so you can see how I'm kind of working in a small little section here, and then sprinkling them a little bit off to the left, like they're just slowly kind of disappearing. But they're starting a little heavier, more in the middle. Heavier meaning like they're a little closer together, a little more clumped. All right, and then maybe I'll work my way down a little bit. I'll leave maybe a little gap. Start to cluster again with all our tiny little guys. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle over to the left. It's kind of similar to what we were just doing with our old green, right? Just a little more of a delicate way of doing it rather than larger blotches to begin with. But yeah, this is what's going to really make it look like it's kind of sparkling, kind of shining right on top. Oh, no worries, Jen. Everyone's doing amazing. Yeah! Yeah, Jen keeps mentioning sharing your art. I always, I feel like I've forgotten to say that the last couple times, but even before we end, I'll mention I love seeing what everyone made. We have lots of little communities where you can share your art. It's kind of all dispersed at this point, but I know Facebook is still sometimes a popular spot. You can post your art in the Facebook event page that I make. I open it up for posting after the event, because if I open it up before, we get people trying to post bogus links to my tutorials. That's the whole thing. So yeah, I'll open it up after, and you're welcome to post any final versions of your paintings. It's just really fun to see how they all turn out. Everyone's interpretations, all the little changes we can see. Discord is also a popular spot as well for just general art sharing in generally. Kohai, welcome in. That's a cute little dancing frog. Very cute. Welcome in. We're just doing a painting tutorial here, teaching people how to paint. If you have any questions, let me know. Yes, so this final yellow, or final green I'm making, rather, this is our 5th green. I would say there's tons of yellow. I think I estimated like 95% yellow. And then there's a little smidgen of white, a smidgen of blue, a smidgen of black. So adding the white just for transparency and maybe to lighten a little bit, but the yellow should be lightening it hopefully enough. So yeah, I know this is tough at this point, but just small little brush strokes, tiny little guys. I know we probably want to get to the end of the painting. We've been painting for almost 2 hours here. But keep holding strong, just keep taking your time. Nice and delicate at this point, just allowing your brush to just kind of graze and rest on the canvas, then pop off again. Boop, 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 kind of twisting it in my fingers as I go. See, it's starting to come through. So I've kind of gone down this way. I'm now going to start to focus more up here as well. I want to make sure I'm hitting the top area with some of this nice, very, very light green. Again, kind of clustering. So small little dots, nice and close together, and then maybe dispersing a little bit as they get further out from this middle area. Oh no! I now have an official art account. Oh gosh! That's not great. I wonder how hopeful, I assume you've like checked in with Instagram on what can be done. Are they very helpful with that kind of stuff? That's terrible. Why would he do that? Or she? Very big invasion of privacy, let me tell you. Two-factor authentication. authentication. Highly recommend. Get that, boost up that security. Not to say it was your fault, of course. That's very malicious of them. Tip about twisting your wrist. Oh, hey, that's good. That's good. I'm glad. Because again, I feel like I do that a little more subconsciously as well. But yeah, literally move, like not even just twisting the brush. I said the wrist. Yeah, like this. It moves the brush around. So when you stroke, it goes up, down, left, right. Cool. Okay, so I would say I've pretty much completed this archway of this lighter color here, and I don't want to go overboard. That was the other key to this color. I'm not sure if I've said it out loud yet, or I thought it in my brain, but we don't want to go overboard with this color because it's a special, very light color. And again, we want it to look kind of delicate on top of everything, just very sparse. It's like the light is kind of choosing tiny little leaves to highlight and they're just sparkling away. But yeah, the last thing I want to do with this color is just sprinkle a little bit further down here. So I'm not doing any of these larger clusters. I'm not trying to really bring the color down. I'm just kind of tapping a little bit here and there. So we get little indications of our really nice light green color. But the most of them are kind of clustered here, and that's what's going to keep this nice shape that we have. Right, so I'm avoiding the very dark areas, but kind of just twinkling them, maybe around kind of this middle to right hand area here. And again, you can look at it from a little further back, give your eyes a squint, whatever helps, just to see how you're doing. If you feel like there's any areas that need to be re-darkened, you can go back with a darker green, kind of dot that in there. But I think generally this is looking pretty good. I can definitely see our dark background, very light foreground, and then a little more of a shadow down here where our branch is gonna start. That's all I'm looking for. Oh gosh. Kohai, I'm sorry. Shorty stalked me, sending letters. Oh no. Oh gosh. I really hope they're able to sort that out. I understand that sometimes it can be a big hassle because sometimes that stuff isn't taken seriously, but I hope you're showing them proof, gathering that proof, especially now that that's happened. Oh yeah, sure. Second to last green was I used it mainly to cover up gaps. You can see there's a lot of it if you kind of focus on this olive color. There's a lot of it all in here, so I pretty much filled up the rest of my gaps. And the only like fancy thing I did with it is I started kind of dotting it out this way in little clusters. So I would dot a bunch of the fourth green like this, and I started doing a little more sparse and smaller dots so they kind of like twinkle out and fade away. It's like indications of little clusters or branches, but we're not even going to add branches. It's just kind of like sections of leaves pulling out to the left. Maybe you can see here, 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 and that's just, again, big pile and then kind of small little dots coming out. Dotting it, but don't want to go. Oh yeah, I feel like with that second last green, the fourth green, it's a little harder to go overboard. I would say going overboard is more the last green we were just working with because it's so light on top. I wouldn't say you can go overboard. I would just make sure you can see mainly just stay away from the very left-hand side and maybe stay a little bit away from this side, but I even twinkled a couple in there. As long as you're still getting those big dark areas in here and here, that's mainly what I was looking for when I was making this. Maybe a tiny bit up here. But yeah, main sections. Oh no. Well, hopefully, I assume you have other communities you can start notifying people and saying unfollow this one, follow that one. Maybe he'll have a change of heart and grant access again. I don't know. It's never happened to me, so I don't really know. I'm sorry. I can only hope there's a change of heart eventually and they realize it was a silly thing to do, and what does it even gain? Yeah. It's all you can do. You'll get back to it, I'm sure. If you got there once, you'll do it again. You'll have even higher numbers, I'm sure. And you know what? The number doesn't even matter. If anything, you'll kind of find the people who really want to follow you for you, right? You'll have more of a dedicated number, even if it's a smaller number. Yeah, there you go. You'll get there, you'll get there. Yeah. Sometimes we start to collect little bot accounts or inactive accounts anyway, so that'll be fine. The people who want to find you will find you. All right, still just giving everybody a moment or two before I move on to our next steps. Just as a heads up, our next step is going to be putting in our nice branches. And for anyone worried about how wet our paint is, don't worry about it. I added the branches just as we did here, just like right after our last step. I went right in with the branches, and the brown color mixed a little bit with the greens, but it wasn't too bad. If anything, it gave it a little more of a flowy look. It's not like going to be a very solid branch on top. It's going to kind of flow in with the green a little bit, maybe come in and out. So that'll be the plan coming up. Still giving a minute or two before we do that. And not too many steps, really. To go, I mean. We've done all our greens, and that was really the bulk of this painting, was getting all those beautiful layers down. We're going to do our branches, and then it's going to be cherry blossoms, which do take a little bit of time, of course. It's not like they're easy to stick on, but that's really, yeah, really it. Branches and blossoms. Oh, that's great. That's great. For your first one, what was the drawing or painting that was asked to do? What was the commission? That's always so exciting. Yeah, and again, I'm sure they'll reach you another way. If it was Instagram, they'll seek you out, and or maybe hopefully you have an email or something. Gotta get some paint ready here. Ugh. Ugh. Oh, Jen left. I forgot to ask about her run. I hope it's still not raining out. Oh, it looks okay. Okay. Oh, I gotcha, yeah. I'm kind of going through the same thing. I think I've mapped out everything. I think I've written down everything for commissions and stuff, but I'm still constantly learning. Every time I look at someone else's commission page, I'm like, that's a good idea to add. Oh, maybe that, maybe that. So yeah, it's a big learning process. I found it very helpful to just kind of check around with what other artists offer and how they describe things, how they verbalize everything. Yeah. Good for you for kind of knowing what you're comfy with, you know? Okay, I'm going to slowly move us into the branches now. And hopefully the branches aren't too intimidating for everybody, because I'll let you know, again, we're kind of applying them quite messy on top of our kind of wet background here. And honestly, the branches kind of fade away a lot, you know, like have a look at the painting there. You can kind of see them here and there, but really they're just kind of placed to hold our blossoms eventually when we put those on top. I would say they kind of sink into the green a little bit, so don't worry about getting them perfect. As always, never worry about getting them perfect, but I think this painting in particular, it's not like a very harsh silhouette on a light background. It's kind of adding in more kind of dirty tones into the green. So a nice little, not even practice run, but just like a nice, hopefully easy way to do some branches. I think the hardest part of the branch is going to be mixing the color. It always is, because I always use like a brown type vibe, and I find a lot of people have trouble mixing browns, but we'll get through it together. It doesn't even need to be the most perfect brown, again, because this is a branch that isn't going to really stand out amongst everything. But I'll teach you what I do to mix brown. We can do our best, and then we can apply it to the canvas. So I use 3 colors for brown. I'm also using my medium round brush still. I think after I mix, I might switch brushes to the large brush, but I'm still technically using my medium round for the time being. I'm mixing together red, yellow, and then I'm going to throw in black. Those are my 3 colors for brown. And it's going to look wild at the start. You're going to be like, what is even happening here? But as you mix them together, I'm hoping you will see a nice brown. It might not be your perfect chocolate bar brown, but it is a brown. Red, yellow, black. And if anything, for this painting, I go a little heavier on the black. I just want these to be very dark branches, and I will be adding like a little subtle highlight to them as well. So for the start, I go a little heavier on the black to get it just nice and deep and dark, really. I just didn't want to use pure black. I didn't want it to be a full silhouette. So I mixed in, again, that red and yellow with the black to make it more of a deep brown. Hopefully you see that there. I know it might be a little hard with lighting, but it's not quite a black, it's a brown. That's what we'll be using. Yeah, I think that makes sense. That makes sense. Get more confident with what you can do and what you can communicate, you can offer, I think is pretty key as well. All right, so I'm trying to have a look at my original while I do this to get it as close as possible, but as usual, keep in mind you can really do what you want with these branches, right? They don't have to go in the exact same spots as mine. But I would recommend just starting in the bottom right-hand corner. That's mainly what I do, and then you can kind of sprawl either up or out to the middle or out to the left, and that's the main idea. So I'll start us off in the bottom left corner. Actually, excuse me, I'm going to switch brushes as well before I begin. I used my medium round to mix, but I personally like to use my large flat for the branches. If you prefer using the medium round or some other brush, please feel free. The reason I like to use this big brush is because it holds more paint and I can kind of do a nice fluid flow all the way. The bristles all line up in a nice thin line so I can do thin branches. I just find this is a good brush for me. So if you'd like to try it with me, you can do the large flat brush with some of that brown. You can see just brushed on the tips so that we still have that nice lineup of bristles. And I'm going to start down here, kind of going diagonally. I'm using all those bristles lined up. So I'm going along the flow of the branch. And I'll start just by moving up here a little bit. So what I'm doing as I go along is I'm kind of going straight a little bit, abrupt curve, straight, abrupt curve, straight. So you can see it's kind of zigzagging along. I'm saying curve, but I might mean corner. There's more abrupt corners rather than curves, kind of like little points in the branch. You can either create those by lifting your brush up and just going another direction, or you can try and flow it a little bit. It might look a little bit messy, but again, I promise you, my branches in the original are messier than usual. I just kind of, again, embraced the messiness of the brown, maybe flowing with the green a little bit. For the most part, you can see it's covering. But yeah, it might kind of collide with the green and maybe mix in a little bit, which is totally fine. As I go further up the branch, I want to make sure my branch is getting thinner and thinner. So what I like to do is just simply reduce pressure. So I'm using more pressure at the start so my bristles kind of flare out more. Even though they are all lined up, they still squish out to the sides, right? And make a thicker branch or a thicker line. And then as I go up, I'm just using a tiny bit of pressure. I'm also kind of using almost the corner of my brush by moving the handle down like this. And maybe you can see my bristles are kind of dragging behind there, creating a very thin line. Okay, so again, you don't need to follow that exact pathway of my branch, but just starting with a nice big branch is a good idea, keeping it nice and thick at the beginning. I'm even going to thicken that branch a little bit more at the start here, make it nice and strong. Kind of like covering almost that whole corner at this point. And again, as long as you're getting either the same width or thinner as you go along, it'll look great. The key is just to not make it thicker as you go along, or else the branch is going to look a little bit kind of top heavy, a little unnatural. We want it strong at the start, thin on the end. Okay, again, I'm just really trying to get this as close as possible to the original. What I do after adding the first kind of big branch is I start to just make a couple, you know, smaller branches or twigs kind of coming off different directions. So maybe there's one that comes this way. Again, see how that green mixed a little bit? Not worried. Just going to pile a little more brown, kind of flow it in there. It all works. Maybe this goes a little longer. Maybe out here a bit. Maybe it kind of splits at the end here. Maybe a tiny twig goes this way. You can see how I'm really trying to stick to that kind of jagged, sharp look. I'm not trying to make nice curves. This isn't really a flowy tree and like curving kind of up and down. It's very abrupt when the tree or the branch changes direction. Very sharp corners. All right, maybe I'm good with this branch. Maybe not. Maybe I add one more little guy up here. Hee hee. Now maybe I'm good with this branch and I want to add more. I'll just continue working off of this large kind of start area here. We don't really have a trunk. It's more of just a large starting of a branch. So I'm going to start back in that bottom right corner. Maybe I'll move a branch coming over here. It's going to go more middle. If you need to start and stop, re-grab some paint, you can absolutely do that. It doesn't need to be one fluid motion. Maybe it stops around there. And I'll let you know, all of my branches, they pretty much stop where those light greens were going. Any of those light greens. I don't really pull my branches past those, because again, that's all background stuff. We want to stick foreground. It's almost like maybe this is a different tree, right? This is just greenery in the background and this is the tree in front. You could think of it that way if it helps. This is me just trying to thicken. A little messy, but that's all right. So I'm just going back and widening my branch a bit at the start. Especially down here. And then once again, because I have this nice big guy, I'll start to grab a couple little twigs, blow them off here. Maybe this one. Oh, there's a nice big boy here from my original. This one kind of comes, ooh, up here. So think of it this way, the more branches you add, the more opportunities there are for blossoms. Right? So we do want to add a fair number of like twigs and even just small branches. We don't need huge branches going everywhere. Just at least some little twigs for your blossoms to hang off of. I will also add blossoms to like the bottoms of these branches as well, so we have all of that space. And we can even float a couple blossoms a little bit off of the tree. We don't need all blossoms to be touching a branch or touching a twig. It's more just good to have them in every general area to make it look like the blossoms are at least close by. My theory is always like, if we don't have a twig painted for the viewer to see, they can at least assume that there's maybe a tiny little twig that just like didn't show up in the painting, you know? Like if there's a blossom kind of floating over here, you would imagine that, oh, there's just a really tiny twig hanging onto it, or maybe there's a branch coming from behind to hang onto that one. So doing that here and there is okay, but in the meantime, it's good to have a lot of branch coverage. So I'll say it again, of course, use my kind of branch pathways here as a good reference, but in the end, just fill up as much or as little as you like in any areas that you like. Maybe I missed an area that you want to add blossoms to, make sure you add a little branch to that area, right? It doesn't need to be exactly the same as me. This guy kind of comes up here. I may have added an extra one. And I'll say again as well, if you feel like, if you have been using this large flat brush with me, you're not vibing with it, switch brushes. Zyko, welcome in. Hello, hello. You could use any brush for this, really. You could even downsize to a tinier brush, like down from the medium round. It'll take you a little longer just because it can't hold as much paint, but it'll get you a nice thin line wherever you need it. And the medium brush does well too. I might even use that one for the highlight portion. It'll just give me a little more flexibility. The flat brush is kind of a blessing and a curse because it creates nice straight lines. But yeah, if you ever want to curve, you can see it gets a little messy with like trying to do a corner fluidly. So no harm in switching for certain points or the whole thing. Oh, just took a bathroom break. Noticed I had a splotch of phthalo. Oh, well, no one saw. No one saw. You're safe. That sounds cute though. How did it get there? All it takes is a little nose scratch, I guess, and then it's there forever. Psycho, hope your Sunday's going well. We're just in the middle of a tutorial if you haven't caught on. Had a long stream day already with playing Majora's Mask and such. Ending it off with a painting toot. So this is a pretty good basic coverage. I'm just kind of looking at my computer screen so I can see this again as a whole. I could probably add a couple more branches here and there. I'll try my best to look at my original and get a couple more if it's even necessary. But yeah, at this point, I would say if you have something around this amount, excuse me, covered, you should be pretty good. I think I might just add one little guy up here. Just kind of poking in from the corner. Oh, maybe there's one coming out this way. Just to kind of allow some blossoms to hide in that corner there. I feel like this could use a little more here. So again, I'm just kind of looking for large areas that have no branches and saying, oh, maybe I want to add a little extra for some blossoms. That guy goes there. Pyro, thank you for the follow and welcome in. We're doing a painting tutorial right now. If you have any questions about what I'm doing, feel free to let me know. Hi. Need the dark in order to show the light. It's true! Bob is so right. What an appropriate quote. We spent all that time in the dark so we could see all the light colors on top. It's true. It's so true. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. He's always so right. Okay, I think I just want to add something in here. I don't see anything in my original, but I think I'll put a little guy in here. See, I just saw that part and I was like, need something a little more. Tiny branch. There you go. That's fine. I think I'll keep it there for a minute here. We can have a look at the branches just bare. And then I'm going to quickly add some highlights, and I only say quickly because they're very messy. We're not going to be too worried about them. It's just to kind of help see some of the branches and maybe the darker spots of the painting, help it pop off a little bit more. Oh, thank you, Pyro. Thank you very much. Yeah, just lots of layers. So what I'm doing, Pyro, is I'm teaching this to everybody. We have some people in the chat who are painting along. Some are just watching and having a good time. Again, if you're interested in learning about what I'm doing or have any questions, feel free to ask, but I'm glad you like it. Oh yes, yeah, I'll keep them bare for a couple minutes at least. Take a picture. Oh, that'll be good. Yeah. That's always just good for step by step in general. Here it is for you. And honestly, they're going to be bare for the next step too, because I'm adding the highlights, so it's not quite blossom time anyway. Oh, I see time is zooming by. I'm just bad at estimates for time, I think. Oh, it'll be 2.5. Easy. It could be 2.5 if you want more of a green painting. I will say. I do like the Cherry Blossom edition, but hey, this could be a vibe too. Maybe you've got a room that's kind of a green theme or you want a green punch of color. Easy. Easy. La 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 la. I will be switching to my medium round brush for the next step as well. Just so everybody knows. I think I'm done with that large flat. It's going to be medium round and or the tiny brush from now on. Oh yeah, gotta mix that up. Yada-da-da. Busy day. Okay. Hopefully you're good with your picture, Shay. Either way, I'm just doing the highlights anyway, so you still got some time here. So as I described, what I want to do now is I just want to do like a very rough looking highlight. You might notice in my original there, especially up here, it seems a lot of it's kind of poking out. Maybe my original, yeah, maybe it was a little darker over here, but either way, as I said, the highlight just kind of helps where the branches are maybe in darker areas. It just helps them pop out a little bit more, and a highlight is always just a nice detail to have. So this highlight I keep describing as messy because it is messy. All good, perfect. Yeah, I'm not worried about what side to put the highlight on. Usually when I'm doing branches, usually there's like a light source in the painting, so I'm like, stick to the left-hand side only. This branch, or these branches, I just kind of highlighted wherever I wanted to. Sometimes I highlight both sides, sometimes I highlight no sides. It's just to kind of, like I said, add a little more detail to the branch, have it pop out a little bit more in the darker areas. So I would say just use it as you like. You can see how I will use it here, and then you can apply it as much or as little as you like. Maybe you don't like the highlight, that's fine too. But I'm using the medium round brush. What I did is I just grabbed some white, I stuck it into any remaining brown that you have, and it kind of results in this kind of like a gray brown. It's not even like a really nice light brown, it just kind of grays it out a bit because I'm using white to lighten it up. So that's all I'm using. Nothing fancy. Yeah, nothing fancy for a messy highlight. You only need a little bit of paint because you're really just using a little bit on your tip of the brush. So I'm kind of brushing it on like this. This is the round brush, but I'm actually kind of lining the bristles up by kind of flattening it a bit on the plate. And then I'm just going to very, again, messily, quickly add some little lines on either edge of my branches, on both maybe, on none maybe, whatever I like. And I promise you, again, messy, messy. I'm trying to stick to the outsides, but sometimes the light brown will kind of trickle into the branch a little bit. Maybe there's some brighter light brown and there's some darker light brown because it's kind of mixing with the dark brown as I go, right? That brown that we just applied for the branches is still a little wet. And that's all okay. Again, I think it all adds to at least this painting, kind of the style of it, a little more layered and messy everywhere. We don't want it too messy, but yeah, it's a little bit more cluttered and clustered and full of different shades of everything. See how that's working? And again, see, I'm gonna zoom you in just to really make sure you know what I'm saying. Look at that messiness. That highlight's going inside. What's going on? It just adds a little texture if it goes inside. That's fine too. Don't worry about the tiny branches. That might be a little too hard to give a highlight to, so don't worry about those. The one thing I will say is I try and avoid doing a solid outline that kind of chops off a branch, if that makes sense. So rather than continuing this line right across, I instead leave a little gap so you can see where the branch is continuing this way. If you're to put the highlight over top, it might look like this branch is kind of disconnected. So that is the one thing I'm being careful of. So for example, here I carried the highlight across here rather than cutting it off, right? So try not to cut off any branches. That's my one piece of advice. These guys could use a nice highlight down here. You can break up the highlight a bit. It doesn't need to be a solid, consistent line. You can see I kind of lift my brush on and off a little bit as I go. That helps make the line and highlight a little more delicate looking if you're kind of breaking it up a bit. And yeah, I kind of said it earlier, but worst case, maybe this isn't a highlight. Maybe it's just like a form of texture. So if it travels a little more into the middle of your branch, honestly, to me, it just kind of looks like highlighting the texture within the branch rather than a highlight on the side. Maybe the light is hitting a little bit of the middle, you know? So again, nice and loose. And just to promote the looseness, I'm also kind of choking down on my brush rather than being intricate like a pencil and going painstakingly. I'm just holding it loose and just kind of letting it flow. Doot, doot, doot. Doot, doot, doot. Doot, doot, doot. Make the noise if it helps you. That guy got thick and that's fine. I think that's all. We don't need much more. Sorry, I want a little more here. I lied. A little more here. Fine. Good. Fine. Good. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. Oh, thanks, Nessa. Yeah. I'm a big fan of this one. I like to think I'm a fan of all my paintings, but this one I do enjoy a lot. Is it Choss? Welcome in. Thank you for the follow. We gotta be close to our goal now. Whoa, we're 11 away! 11 more of you, and then we have a slumber party stream. Yeah! Oh, it's 10, you're right. It actually just changed as you said that. I was like, 10, what do you mean? I can math. We're at 990. Exciting. Wow, it's gonna happen sooner than I thought. I literally talked about it earlier. I was like, a few more weeks. We only have 10 to go. We can find 10 more people. Cool. Cool. Okay, I'm still pausing here. I want to make sure we have a little more time for those highlights. And honestly, I just want to make sure we have a good amount of time for this darker brown to be dry. Mine is pretty much dry. I just touched a big lump there and a tiny bit came off. But before we add our blossoms, that dark brown should be nice and dry. The light brown isn't as much of a big deal. You're right, Shay. You're so right. People are finding the blossoms. Glad you all like them. Okay, I just want to decide order of things here for the blossoms. We have a couple pinks and peaches to deal with. Yeah, we'll do light pink first, then we can do peach and then dark pink. Okay, okay. That's easy enough. I figured it out. There you go. See, yeah, I ended up making an even lighter green yellow to dot on some highlights, embracing, taking my time. Good job. I feel like I could have too. I feel like I could have gone even further with the lighter greens. Not to say I did in my original, but like I could have with this one for sure. I think my original had a lighter light green. I think I maybe added a little more white. But yeah, and those are extra things that like you can even do right at the end as well. We get some blossoms on, or maybe I can show on mine as well. How just a couple little extra things can really pump it up more. It just makes it more twinkly. I keep using the word twinkly for this painting because it does look like it kind of sparkles. Because there's so many brush strokes, right? Because we took our time and did all of those little guys, it really makes it look a lot more complicated than it is. It's just layers. Okay, I'm going to discuss the blossoms for a bit. You still have some time if you're still working on some branches, catching up a little bit. But I'll discuss the blossoms a bit while we're waiting here. Let me slide this painting through here. Ooh, secret spot. Will that work? There we go. Okay. So yeah, blossoms are what change it from just a green painting to more of a green-pink painting, which is lovely. So here we are. Let me show you these blossoms here. So once again, we're kind of working with the idea that our foreground is a little further to the right, and as we get further to the left, we get more background. So you can even see that with the blossoms, right? How we start to dot on the blossoms at the start, just like we were doing with the greens. We make maybe more medium-sized dots or blotches. We start to get into more actual blossom shapes here with petals. And then over here on the right-hand side, very foreground, right next to us, this is where the camera is, this is where we're looking from. All these branches are right in front of us versus these guys are kind of moving away and to the left. Okay, so we're going to start off actually with the big blossoms because they use kind of this light, very light pinky peach color. All right, so I'll kind of show you how to shape these guys out. And again, the blossoms are kind of messy. We can of course see, you know, some petal shapes. But if I get you up close here, hopefully you can see that they're not necessarily clean. Like they're not like very clean edges everywhere. You can see a little bit of maybe some bristles getting a little messy, you know. These aren't nicely rounded, they're just kind of choppy. And again, those all add, so keep that in mind. Again, we don't need it to be perfect, especially this guy. Look at that guy. He's got so much going on. And it almost adds, you know, to the blossom. I know before we said we don't like transparency, but we see a little transparency at the ends of our petals. It kind of makes the blossom look a little more delicate, a little lighter, a little more tissue paper, you know? So if there's a little bit of transparency, we can embrace it at this point. Yeah, I'll start us off with the bigger blossoms. We'll dot on some of the same color over here. I'll then move us to kind of this peach color. So we have a light pink, we have a peach, and then we have a dark pink. Light pink is for the big blossoms and some dots. Peach is just for dotting. And then the pink, the hot pink I should say, is the middles of the blossoms to kind of get this nice dark middle, getting the nice centers, and kind of blending a little bit too to make it a little softer. Okay, excuse me, so 3 colors left, 3 colors left. 3 steps and 3 colors. All right, so let's start you off with that light pink as I described. So I'm going to use, again, the medium round brush. Tried and true. I'm going to grab a large pile of white, hopefully with nothing in it, just because my plate is messy. And grabbing a tiny bit of red, just the tiniest bit. I want the white to change to a super, super light pink. Very cute. See how light that is. We don't want it to be hot quite yet. We just want a nice light pink. That's probably good there. So you can see I was just taking the very tip of my brush, dotting it into the red, mixing it into a big pile of white. I could even use a bigger pile of white. Some green snuck in there, but I think it'll be okay. Maybe a little more red. So barely there, because the real pink that we're going to be using is for the middle of these flowers. So for anyone who are like big fans of pink, you'll get your pink. Just want to stay a little bit lighter first. Okay, I'm going to use the very tip of the brush. The first thing I want to do is just choose a spot where I want to blossom. Let's just choose there. And what I like to do is I like to take the tip of my brush. I personally like to pull from the outside and into the middle. Into the middle, into the middle. And I try to very, just lightly, try and form like 4 to 5 petals. I don't need an exact number, just lightly forming petals. And I do this by stroking a couple times into the middle, leaving a little gap, stroking a couple times into the middle, leaving a little gap, stroking a couple times, gap, stroke a couple times, gap, stroke a couple times. If those gaps kind of fill in, you can see that's okay. The last little bit there wasn't a whole lot of gap between my last few petals, but that's the point. We could still see a little bit of an indication of some petals. Some of them get a little tighter, but still be looking like a flower, right? So that's all what we're looking for, is just slight indication of flower. Looking, no blossoms when I looked up, and then there were blossoms. Oh yeah, that was the final one, whoops. That would have been the quickest blossom ad ever. Finish the owl, you know? Step 1, draw a circle. Step 2, finish the owl. Okay, I'll do that again. Choosing a spot. If it helps you to put a dot there for your spot, do it. You know, you don't necessarily need the dot. You could just start pulling into a middle area. Tip of the brush with my light pink. Couple strokes, leave a gap. Couple strokes, leave a gap. And again, you can kind of point your brush the direction. That does help me when pulling in. So you might see me flip the brush over here. Couple strokes in, couple strokes in, couple strokes in. There it is again. And that's how we get kind of those messy petals. So rather than those really clean, like oval petals, I want these to be a little choppier, because that's how blossoms are in real life. A little choppier on the edges. Okay, so do some like medium size, do some larger ones. I started in the middle here, but I do want to make sure I'm doing my bigger ones over to the right hand side. So these guys are probably going to be the biggest ones in the middle. I more so want to do this size here. They're almost like tiny little stars. And again, the smaller they get, the harder it'll be to do all those nice petals. So don't worry too much if they start to combine a little bit. You can see it's more just a star shape at this point. As long as you have just indication of flower, you're good. Even that little guy, it's just like I pulled in a couple strokes to the middle, and there's a little flower indication. In terms of placement, you can see I'm kind of going all over, as long as I'm close to or on top of a branch. So that includes ends of branches, here, here, here. That includes like a little bit up a branch. That includes on the thicker part of the branches. They can grow really everywhere, at least in my painting. I don't really know if that's true, if they would grow on like a thick part, but maybe they do. And yeah, I just wanted to really fill up my painting, so I decided they're growing kind of everywhere at this point. And that's okay. All right, so I'm getting some bigger ones in here, and I'm still dispersing some small ones. It's not like there can only be big ones, only medium ones. They all, of course, disperse a little bit. You'll get some budding ones. I'll teach you about how to add some more budding flowers a little bit later. For now, I'm just sticking to this one type here. I've got a couple other shapes I can teach you. I just ran into an issue where I had a little bit of wet green, which I'm kind of surprised by. Maybe I had a big blob hanging around. In that case, I just wipe off my brush. I'm grabbing a little more paint, just kind of blopping it on top, not worrying about it. I can always go on top a second time once that's all a little more dry. Oh, sorry to backtrack you. Can you remind me how you mix the brown? Yes, so brown is going to be red, yellow with a little bit of black. I start with the red and yellow first to make kind of an orange, and then the black makes it a little more brown. And then very easy for the highlight, you just add white to that. So the white's going to make it more of like a gray brown, but it lightens it up, and that's the whole point. And I mentioned, if anything, like I'm not even trying to go for a chocolatey brown. I just added like a larger amount of black, I would say, to my red and yellow than I usually do, just to make sure it's a really dark color. If it's kind of like a dark murky color, that's fine. I feel like I want even more brown in this one than in my original. In my original, I feel like if you zoomed in, it would look more like a murky, like very dark, muddy color. So if that helps, then yeah, hopefully that works. Adding blossoms, adding blossoms. So again, hopefully we're keeping it nice and loose here. We're not too worried. I know it's easy to get caught up in wanting to make these super detailed, and you can, like, if you want to have a really detailed, nice, accurate painting with accurate blossoms, feel free. But I kind of like them a little messier. And see how this is covering so nicely? We're using lots of white, so that's why. I just find the white paint just saves all in terms of transparency. So another example of like a floating blossom, you can see the middle isn't like right on the branch, but the, you know, the petals are touching a little bit. Same thing with this guy. He's going to start a little off of the branch, but he's close by, so we can imagine there's a little twig that he's hanging on to. That's fine. Sometimes I stroke from the middle out. That's a little rare. I like to go outside in, but there's no rule that says you can't go inside out. If anything, that'll allow you to kind of flick your brush if you like that softer outline, softer tip, I guess, of the petal. If you start in the middle and flick outwards, you'll kind of notice a little bit of like a sharper, more feathered edge. It almost looks a little too feathered for me, so that's why I like to start from the outside and pull in. I feel like it's a little more controlled. I just know where the petal's going a little bit more if I go outside in. Maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't, and that's okay. Okay, this is starting to fill up, especially with my big blossoms, so I'm gonna do maybe a couple more bigger ones, and then I want to talk about my more medium and smaller ones. There's not too much of a difference, but I can show you a couple like blooming or budding blossoms as well, and I think those are nice to add in there. Just to complement some of the more full blossoms, the larger ones. One, two, three, four. Like this one almost looks like 6, but it's okay. 6 petals. Okay, maybe I'll stop there for my more like full looking blossoms, and I can, like I said, chat about the either like blooming ones or just little dots at this point too. So for blossoms that maybe like they're not facing you wide open, looking right at you, maybe they're more on the side, or maybe they're kind of budding. You can do something that kind of looks like 3 petals almost, kind of coming from a center point, almost in like a V shape, or I guess a W if there's 3. So for example, maybe I'll choose right here. I'm gonna pull 1, so that's a couple strokes for 1, 2, 3. See how it looks kind of nestled in there too? It's kind of like just blooming outwards that way rather than straight at us. And then when I take my pink, I'm going to use the hot pink to kind of highlight the middle, which is going to be more down here rather than the exact middle. So it makes it look like it's kind of showing from the side a bit. So let me show again. Maybe I'll go here. And I kind of like to find little pockets to put them in because I like the idea of them being nestled and safe. So there's 1, 2, 3. I might fill that in a little bit more. Yeah, and that guy is coming from the side. You could even simplify it more and literally just do one petal or 1 stroke. Makes it look like it's a literal like bud that hasn't quite opened up yet. I love that for especially like these little endings of the branches, right? Just a couple little motions with your brush. Very teeny tiny. You can add again tiny ones where the big ones are because they're just little baby blossoms that haven't blossomed yet. I could really go all day with these, but I'll try to just keep moving along on my painting. So we got the sides, we got the buds. And I guess the only thing that's left with this color is just adding some very teeny tiny blossoms kind of on the left. So as I said, the left side is, you know, my idea is that it's getting further away from us the further left we go. So we're not really going to do any full blossoms over here, maybe just like tiny little guys, but for the most part, I'm either just dotting my brush or maybe doing a quick little like crisscross with my brush so you can see like tiny little petals. But yeah, dots or crisscrosses are going to be more on this left-hand side here, with things only starting to get more medium-sized as we get more to the middle. So I start to really load these up. You can really cluster these kind of like we did with our light greens, how I started doing a bunch of little dots kind of floating away almost. So you don't need to be so intentional with these. They don't all need to be an exact bud or, you know, side view. They can just be small little clusters that maybe float off of the branch a little bit, and that's okay. As long as they're close by, that's all fine. But that's a very easy way to make it seem a lot fuller, is just to kind of cluster a few of these little brush strokes or dots together. Yeah, as if they're budding, or as if like maybe they're bloomed and just a little further away, a little more out of sight, right? So we're not going to see the details quite as much. And I keep using the word cluster because I don't want to like equally fill up this whole area with these dots. I just want them in little batches. So we can still see where these branches are going and where, you know, the majority of our blossoms are. They're not going to be fully dispersed like the greens are. And again, I can even cluster them kind of around our medium sizes a bit, as if they're a little further out of sight or budding. Cute. Gonna leave a minute or two, and then we can move on to a new color, which we'll use just to keep adding. So we're going to use a peach color in a moment or two, I'll let you know. Just to kind of keep filling in with those little dots, the smaller blossoms, just to add a little bit more, yeah, different color here, because this is all very, very light pink. And I was kind of describing earlier how these lighter colors look more foreground. So just to kind of allow these clusters to stick back a little bit, I will be adding more of a peach color to these. And then our final touch will be going in with a hot pink for the middles of our bigger blossoms. But yeah, we're not going to touch up our tiny guys. They're just going to stay their little dotted selves. So I'll give a minute or two. Hope we're all hanging in there, and if not, that's okay. If you need a break, if you need to finish this another time, that's all fine. But either way, I hope you are enjoying it or have enjoyed. I can't believe this has turned into a 3-hour tube, but here we are. I still have to figure out next month's toot. Unfortunately, I don't have a design to show you at the end of the event like I sometimes do. Looking for ideas in case anyone has suggestions who is here, or maybe if you're watching on YouTube, you want to throw a comment there suggesting what to paint next. Raccoons were suggested to me. I'm still trying to think of a little raccoon design. I think that would be a cute idea to do a cute little animal for springtime. But I struggle with animals, so we will see where I go with that one. I think I need a little more white paint, and then we can keep going. Oh, I should be showing you here. I'm just going ahead and mixing our next color. So again, I'm going to show you our peach color, which is next. So this is color number 2 of the blossoms. We're doing a nice peach color for just the background blossoms, and then we'll do a nice hot pink as our third. So peach coming up now. So I'm taking my medium round brush. I'm mixing together white with a little more red than last time. So I'm looking for a little bit of a brighter pink, but still on the light side. And then to make it more of a peach, just to kind of contrast the pinks that we're using, I'm adding a tiny amount of yellow. We want to be quite careful with the yellow. We don't want to add too much because that'll turn this orange. We don't really want an orange going on. We just want a peach. So a little yellow in there. It almost like it dulls down the pink a bit, which is nice too. It's not quite as vibrant. I want to save our vibrant pink for the centers of our blossoms. Almost there, a little tiny bit more. So just a little smidgen of yellow, mix it in, see how it looks. Just a general peach color. See that compared to something like this, a lot brighter. It's more vibrant, a little more dulled down. So I just want to disperse this in amongst our nice light pink, just to add a little bit more, and also just to add a different color in there, because again, as I said, we want some maybe darker colors where the background stuff is going. So this is going to help kind of keep things looking just a little darker. Just a little bit. And it just adds another nice color to our painting, you know? A nice peach is nothing to sneeze at. We love our peaches. It is almost, I just kind of thought of this, it's almost like a little bit of a transition too from the pinks to the greens, because we added yellow to our pink, right? And if you remember, we've been using greens with a lot of yellow, so it's almost like this kind of gets a little closer to those colors, maybe matches a little bit better. But yeah, I think it looks nice. Maybe that's the reason I think it's appealing looking. We're just adding a little bit of our yellow that we've been using so much. So again, I'm literally just dotting these on. I'm just kind of adding to the clusters I've already formed with the light pink that we were using. I don't make any blossom shapes with these peaches. I'm literally just doing all the little dots with these guys. I'm saving my blossom shapes for the light pink that we've already done, and then the dark pink which we're adding to the middles. So I am bringing these into the middle as well, because some of these branches might be kind of traveling backwards, right? They might be traveling away from us rather than at us. So we can still have little clusters of smaller blossoms around too. Or again, just the idea that maybe some of the blossoms haven't bloomed. Just sprinkling in. Again, if you see me squinting, I'm just trying to find any big gaps that maybe I want to add just one or two to. Again, I like the idea of clusters so you can kind of see more indications of where the branches are, but nothing wrong with throwing at least one or two, because maybe they're kind of falling off, maybe they're little petals, who knows what they are, right? Just to pretty up those areas. Dotting in a couple extra. Maybe a couple up here. Like maybe this branch, you know, even though it's further right, could be going away. There's not really big blossoms on this one, so I think that fits that theory. Maybe throw a couple down here with the smaller guys. Don't want to go too much. Again, I feel like I really could go all day with these, but a little more, just a little more. And just another thought for you too, like these little tiny peach guys in the middles, they could be, you know, branches that are further back that we don't even see. So you could think of them a lot of different ways. Like it all can make sense in your brain, right? Just wouldn't want you lining up all the little blossoms all in a row on a branch. Want them a little more clustered, a little more sporadic and clustered. Okay, I think that's getting pretty twinkly and filled. I feel like this, if anything, looks bare, but I'll wait till I add my hot pink centers, make a little judgment call, and I can always add a couple more big blossoms there if I want. Cute. Ooh, a quick minute or two, and then we will add the centers. Make them nice and pink. It'll add a little more shape to our blossoms too. They won't look like little explosions. They'll look a little more like our blossoms, a little more like flowers. Constantly checking my reference here. I think I could have gone a little further with my light greens too. Kind of more here, here, here. Again, I could always add those more if I want. A little later. La 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 la. This last step, I'll finally be using this teeny tiny brush. I introduced 3 brushes at the start, and I have failed to use the tiny brush this entire time until now, but it will be very useful for this last step here. All right, let me show you how to mix this last color. Very easy. We're just mixing 2 colors together, and then we can apply it. So for our last color, we want like I would say like a medium to hot pink. It's going to be very bright. Mixing together white and red, so we can see a difference between our peach and this nice bright pink there. I'll be mixing that together for the middle of our blossoms. Thin lines you can achieve with your flat brush are such goals. I'm not mad at my tree, but he a little chalker in places that I didn't intended. Those stops will get... Yeah, exactly. You can cover those up. You can even go back with your green. It might even look like the green is kind of on top, but again, the theory of like the branches could be going back into the greenery, right? They kind of hide a little bit. Thank you, though. Such goals. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know how I decided to land on the large flat brush for thin lines, but it seems to work. It seems to work. I think my logic makes sense, but it's definitely not for everybody. So, you know, it doesn't even have to be goals. It's just find the brush that works for you. But thank you. I do appreciate it. It's taken a long time. Okay, taking that, I'm gonna call it a hot pink. It's maybe not the hottest pink in the world, but it's a pretty hot pink compared to all of our other things going on here, all of our colors going on. I'm just grabbing a little bit on my brush. So again, my teeny tiny brush is what I'm using. And if anything, I do like to have less paint at this stage, so I kind of wipe off just a little bit on my paper towel. And the reason is because I don't want to blob on very thick lines in the middle. I kind of like them a little more loose and transparent looking. And if you just have a little bit of paint, it kind of feathers out a little bit nicer, creates a little bit of transparency at the ends. So what I did there is I just went from the middle. This time I am going from the middle out. I like to kind of push out a little bit, kind of flick out a little bit. And I'm just kind of creating like a mini pink explosion inside the pink cherry blossom. I'll do it again here, starting in the middle. A little bit of paint, so I'm just wiping off a bit on my paper towel. And then I'm going to do some little flicks almost, flicking outwards, kind of towards the ends of the petals, but not quite to the very ends, of course. And again, quite messy. It's not like all of my little flicks and lines are the same length. Some of them are quite short, some of them are a little longer. And I kind of chalk that up to maybe some of the petals are a little curved, maybe some of them are straight out. Maybe the flower isn't facing us, it's facing a little tilted, so you're going to see some differences in that dark pink. Again, I think the messiness kind of adds to it looking a little more natural. I'm also just using a small amount of pressure. I'm not trying to like slam the brush on and get as much paint off as possible. I just like kind of grazing it. And again, I think that promotes a little bit of softness in there. When you reach any blossoms that are like the 3 petals or kind of from the side, you won't want to go 1, 2, 3 up all of the petals. I like to just go up kind of the middle petal and then a little up the sides, as if the dark pink is being covered by those 2 outside petals, which are kind of like cupping around. So I'm starting a little higher up than the bottom edge. I'm flicking upwards and leaving these 2 blank. So hopefully you kind of see that idea. These 2 petals being in the foreground, kind of covering up as they curl around. Back to my regular blossoms. Flick, flick, flick. Flick, flick, flick. Flick, flick, flick. And the great part about this is in any part of the painting, really, you can cover up, you know, anything you don't like. If maybe you go a little heavy on the pink, you want to keep these a little bit lighter. Just go back to your light pink, cover up a little bit of the edges of that dark pink center, and you're good to go. Oh, I snuck a little one in here. But yeah, minimal paint on the brush. I find that really helps too, just for a nice like dry texture, very soft looking. Like that guy got a little out of hand. I might cover him up with some light pink later. Not worried about it for now. I try not to worry about it anyway. Maybe I'm staring at it this entire time worrying about it, but I'm not fixing it for now. Easier to do that at the end, just kind of go in and touch up a couple things. And I haven't been wiping off my brush because I have just the tiniest amount of paint here. It looks like a big blob, but it's all very thin. worn down, so I'm kind of scraping up the remainder of the paint, getting just little amounts on my brush as a result. And then it softly applies. Okay, that's pretty good. Oh, I missed a couple. Don't forget them. Ah. Don't leave them behind. There you go, little guy. I think I got all of them. Anyone see any blossoms I missed? So yeah, just for example, just as an example, this isn't a step, I'm just showing you if you want to cover something up, obviously, you're just taking the color you want to cover with. So I'm taking a nice light pink, the one I started with. I'll just kind of brush it into the middle, and that way I kind of shrink up the center a bit, break up the center a bit. This guy traveled a bit high up. There we go. I could really touch up every single one, but I won't. I'll try not to. That's a little thick there too. There we go. Cute. So I feel like at this stage, that was obviously the final step. I will say at this stage, I feel like I could definitely go back in and keep adding. I feel like I didn't add quite as many blossoms as in my original. And that's just for the interest of time. I wouldn't want you here all day. So I could obviously do that. Maybe you're feeling the same way. Maybe you're like, oh, I wish I had just a couple more. Add a couple more. Go back to your light pink, add a couple big guys, add a couple little dots. Maybe you want to play with your green a bit more. You can, of course, do that. Maybe you want to darken things up, add a couple patches of dark green now that we have all our beautiful, very vibrant blossoms on the painting. I feel like that's an easy thing to do as we get caught up with wanting to make things lighter. And then by the ending stage, you're like, oh, maybe it's a little too light, you know? As Bob Ross said, we need the dark to see the light. So if you feel like some of your dark green got a little covered, just add a couple patches, maybe in the holes here, you know, where you could see past these branches. But otherwise, I think that's all I would do to my painting. Maybe add, as I was saying earlier, a couple extra light green leaves over here, kind of to match where the blossoms are going. But otherwise, I think I would just be adding lots more blossoms personally. I really loaded up my original, just for a comparison. Let me see here. Quick change. There to there. Like, it's just more filled. And the green definitely goes out further. Now that I see, you see how there's like a hard edge here? I think I could have carried my green out further so that my blossoms were resting on top and then light green was continuing. So if you want some extra tips to really pump it up from here, that's what I would say. Just go back in with a couple light or dark shades, get your light shades further out, maybe add a little more darkness in the middle, and more blossoms. You can always add more blossoms. Cool, well that concludes it. That concludes today's tutorial. Nice 3-hour gig here. My gosh. If you're watching on Twitch and still painting, keep painting. I'm here for a little bit longer. I don't peace out immediately. I like to make sure I'm answering any questions or repeating anything in case anyone missed. But I'm going to do my little YouTube outro, so just stick with me. I'm going to say bye, but I'm not leaving Twitch, so give me a second. Those on YouTube watching me, thank you very much for watching. I hope you had a good time. As I said earlier, maybe you missed it in the middle of the tutorial, but I'd love to see your finished paintings. Places to post them include the Facebook event page. All these links are probably in the description below. Facebook event page, my Discord server, Instagram. If you want to post it to Insta and tag me either in a story or a post, feel free. I would love to see what you made here. Again, I'm looking for suggestions for upcoming tutorial ideas, so if you want to leave a comment with an idea for me, be it a specific animal, be it a specific scene, maybe check through what I've done prior. But yeah, anything and everything I'm happy to hear about, and here's a suggestion so that I can make some new upcoming designs, or maybe it's a technique you want to learn, a style you want to learn. Feel free to let me know and I can see what I can do. In terms of the next tutorial, I don't have one booked quite yet. I expect it to be in the next month or so. I've been liking our Sundays. I've been liking like once a month on a Sunday. So I would just check my Facebook page, facebook.com/erinbunpaints, and see when a little event pops up. I always make a Facebook event with the displayed painting, a date and time, or you can go over to Twitch, here on Twitch where I am live right now, and check out my little about description, and I always try and link a nice little date and time for the upcoming tutorial. I hope to get that organized in the next week or two for next month, so you can look out for that. If you liked what I did here, again, feel free to check me out on Twitch. I'm not doing step-by-step tutorials every single time I'm live, but I'm usually painting. I'm usually doing some sort of artwork. I've been working on a lot of different things recently, things I'm really excited about, things that I'm spending much more time on and I feel like I'm challenging myself with. So if you like that idea, kind of watching me create more difficult things or just asking me questions about painting or just hanging out and having a good time, I'm on Twitch Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. Again, doing some painting, doing a little digital art now, and then doing a little gaming on the weekends. So you can check me out there. Oh, this is quite a spiel. What else? I think that's all. Oh, sign your paintings. That's always one I forget. Sign your paintings, please. I always suggest you sign your paintings just to like complete it and make it all done. It's especially a good thing if you're wondering when you're done the painting. You're like, I don't know, I could keep working on this forever. Sign it. It'll make it done. It'll make it complete. And hopefully it makes you feel like a nice artist. You know, you've completed a painting, you've signed it, decided that it's all done. It just kind of adds to it. Yep. I'm mixing up everything. I should probably end it off here. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Watch for more videos, and I'll see you another time. Okay, bye.